I can't see it either with that glare. I think it's 10 seconds past.
Okay, here we go. I'm going to call the City Council meeting of March 1st to order. First order of business. Sandra, would you please call the roll?
Tennant.
Here.
Farrell.
Here.
Adams. Here. Lewis. Here. Gray. Here. Teal. Here. Kenyon.
Here.
Petty.
Here.
Mayor Jordan.
Here. Would you join me in reciting the pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, the first order of business we have tonight is the quarterly financial report from Paul Becker, Finance Director. Paul?
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm doing a quarterly report, and this is the fourth quarter of 2010. So this is the final for 2010. Now, this is unadjusted, subject to audit, so there may be some adjustments. But I'm going to center on the general fund because that's the fund that's been under stress. That's the fund that's the discretionary fund, and that's the fund that has most employees and most of the general expenses of the city for city operations. So I've prepared a very quick slide presentation that I'm going to go over. I won't keep it long. I know there's a long agenda tonight. First, we're going to look at the budget and where the budget ended up and what we were looking at the end of the year for comparison purposes. The revenue budget adopted was $33.3 million. Expenses were projected to be $34.4 million, which would have been a shortfall out of reserves of $1.1 million. And if you'll remember, during the discussions of the 2010 budget, we talked about that and decided to use reserves to close the gap between revenue and expenses. So that was the budget coming into 2010. During the 2010 budget year, we have adjustments to the budget. Some of those budget adjustment examples would be grants coming into the general fund. They would also be things like donations, purchases that had been unanticipated. When we ended the year, we readjusted for reappropriation. The budget was estimated to be $34.1 million in revenue, $35.2 million worth of expenses. Now, in addition to that, let's go back and remember at the end of the first quarter, we were looking at significant revenue shortfalls. Sales tax had declined quite a bit in the first quarter. As the mayor had promised during the 2010 budget, he came forward with a plan on how we would meet that revenue shortfall that at that point we projected to be about $1 million by the end of the year. Remember, the key points of that plan were to freeze 13 open positions that we wouldn't fill for the year, reductions of overtime, especially in the public safety area, some adjustment into places like parks, adjustments into the HR budget, things of that nature, to come up with roughly $1 million to meet that expected revenue shortfall at that point in time. Again, as you remember, toward the end of the year, things did get a little better. But going in, that's what we had predicated the budget on at that point in time. Now we're going to see how do we actually turn out. Compared to what our expectation was, how do we really end up the year? If we look at revenue came in at $33.7 million. That was a shortfall of $400,000. Now that's a far cry of the $1 million that we had expected at one point in time. Remember, that occurred basically in the fourth quarter. Fourth quarter is when sales tax revenue picked up, and we also actually had a bump in franchise fees, which personally I had not expected because development is down so far. And of course, franchise fees are those fees we collect for utilities to run their lines across city-owned property. But that we got a little bump of about $200,000. So the revenue really came in much better than had been expected during the first quarter of 2010. Now we're going to look at the key, and the key is expense. How do we do on expense control? Remember, in addition to that $1 million that we talked about reducing the budget to meet that expected revenue shortfall at the end of the first quarter, we talked about looking at all the positions that came forward to be refilled as we had turnover. We looked at those positions. We held them off as long as possible. We asked the department directors and the department heads to look and say, can you exist for 3 months without this position? Can you stall a little longer in this? And so we delayed much of that replacement. In addition to that, we challenged the department directors and the department heads to look at every expenditure and think through those expenditures and think if there's anything we could hold off on this fiscal year. They did a fantastic job. Our expenses for the year were $32.6 million, or a reduction of $2.6 million that we didn't spend, that we were authorized to spend. That gives us a $2.2 million swing. We went from a expected deficit of $1.1 million to a surplus of $1.1 million. That's almost 7% of the expenditure budget we were able to defer. Everybody participated in that. Certainly, it starts at the top and filters down, but everybody participated in this. And I'm very excited about the results, as you could probably tell. So that's where we ended up.
I'm going to let you applaud for that.
Okay. I'm going to put my normal caveats in. Remember, the one thing to remember, a couple of points here. This is a expense reduction surplus, not a revenue generated surplus. That means it's one time. It happened this year. That's not going to carry on in the future. Remember, we already reduced that budget going into 2011. So the 2011 budget's already been reduced. This is a one-year surplus that we're looking at. A revenue increase we could reasonably expect to continue forward, but we can't do that. So the mayor will tell you I always have to give you some bad news in here, even if I do have some good news. Coming into 2010, we started with an $8.8 million surplus. I'm going to go over an analysis of the reserve position, or what we term as fund balance. Coming in, we were looking at $8.8 million. We had a $1.1 million surplus, giving us $9.9 million to come into 2011. If the projections remain the same or hold for 2011, we would come in with a $9.9 million reserve position. Remember, when we formulated 2011 budget, we formulated that on using $500,000 in reserves, $1 million transfer from the capital projects, and $500,000 from reserves. We also have to account for rebudgets, which, remember, those projects in process that we bring over to the new budget year. That was $600,000. So if all projections at this point hold to the end of the year, we would have an $8.8 million reserve position at the end of 2011. What does that mean? What do we have on what we call free reserves, or reserves that we could use for other purposes above and beyond the safety net policy that was approved by the council? The safety net policy, which is 60 days worth of operating expenses, is $5.6 million based on our expenditures for 2010. At this point in time, that would leave us $3.2 million in what we'll term free reserves at the end of 2011 if everything comes out as anticipated. Remember, during the budget discussions, we were talking about potentially $1 million in reserves. So that's a significant change. Based on these facts, it's well known that the mayor's number one priority is to look at something for the employees. Employees haven't received a raise since July 2009. So the mayor has asked us to look at some type of compensation package. Also, I'll mention that during the budget hearing, several council members were very vocal of looking at some type of compensation for the employees. At that point of time, if you remember, I was very defensive about the position, and I didn't think this was a proper time and that we could afford it at that point in time. But based on these operating results, I think we can afford to do something. And I know several council members expressed an interest in somehow looking at doing something for our employees. Now, we'll have to do it on a basis where it's kind of a one-term salary adjustment. But that's what we're working on, and that's what we intend to bring to the council at the next agenda session is a plan. And I'll be happy to answer any questions about the general fund operations if you have any.
One question, Bob.
Paul, I just got a question. If from what you prognosticate on the liability side of the ledger, if we trying to play Otto the optimist, if our revenue side is better than it was last year,
yes.
How far into the year will it be before you think you've got a pretty good snapshot of where we're going to end up?
Up we are with the revenue. I'd like to wait till at least the end of the first quarter as a good indicator. The bellwether, of course, are December receipts that we receive in January, and those we already have, and the revenues look pretty good. But I would at least wait a quarter. I like to do it quarterly because you can have any turn at any point in time. And of course, this I said about the general fund, I'll just quickly mention, it involves other funds. Any salary package would involve other funds, but the operations in other funds have been very positive this year. Water and sewer will be up in excess of $800,000, $800,000 surplus this year. Solid waste will have a surplus in the neighborhood of $800,000. We had positive operations in the street fund. So I feel confident that we're in a position that we can really look at this package and discuss it at the next agenda session and the next council meeting.
Well, this is great news. I am very, very, very excited. You know, as I've said before, I think our very greatest resource as an organization is our staff. And I think our staff has really stepped up to the plate during this time when we've asked them to tighten their belts and tighten their belts, and department heads have tightened their belts and tightened their belts some more. And I appreciate it so much. And because they've done that, that's the reason we have this money that we can give for a bonus. And so I am just ecstatic about the fact that we can finally say to our staff, you hung in there with us. And the other point that's so significant, they've taken up the slack with 23 FTE of jobs not being filled when they've been vacated. So I am just so pleased, so happy with this report, and I will certainly support whatever the staff brings forward.
Brenda.
Actually, would you want to go next? Yeah.
We both had our hands up.
Well, all right, Rhonda, you go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. I just want to say I think it's wonderful news, and as a relatively new member of the council, I've been very impressed with our city staff and employees. It's been very exciting to see what they've done, and I've witnessed firsthand with some of them how short-handed they have been and how they've smiled and worked right through it. And I think you are to be commended, all of you, for what you've done. I'm very proud, Mayor, to be a part of this, and I look forward to hearing your discussions and ideas on salary packages or whatever we might do for our employees. I think 2 years, almost 2 years, is a long time to go without a raise, and I'm very excited to hear this and look forward to hearing your ideas.
Well, I think everything's been said, but I'll just repeat it. I think staff has done a fantastic job of doing with less people and reducing costs, less in their budgets, and I think they definitely need to be rewarded. And you know, I feel like that whatever we can do at this time will be good. I know it's not anything you know, like they deserve, but if we can do something, I think that's good. I think we need to be sure and consider retention whenever we're looking at this, because as the economy has kind of improved, a lot of our schools and so forth have kept up with raises, and I feel like that we need to be doing the same with our employees and you know, rewarding them for their hard work. So I, again, look forward to seeing what staff has to come up with.
Okay, anybody else? Also, as being on the A&P Commission, we got word today that the HMR tax was up 8.7
Wow.
for the month of January. I believe that's correct.
Yep, that is correct. Very good.
So,
Good news.
very good news.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Paul. The next order of business is the consent agenda. Number one is approval of the February 8, 2011 special city council meeting and February 15, 2011 city council meeting minutes. Number two, Washington County interlocal agreement, a resolution approving an interlocal agreement between the city of Fayetteville, Arkansas and Washington County, Arkansas to provide animal sheltering services to Washington County through 2011. Number three, bid number 10-56, Upchurch Electric Supply Company, a resolution awarding bid number 10-56 and authorizing the purchase of 25 LED light fixtures and poles from Upchurch Electric Supply Company and the total amount of $49,981.88 for installation on Frisco Trail between Maple Street and Spring Street. Number four, bid number 11-21, Phelps Construction Company Incorporated, resolution awarding bid number 11-21 and authorizing a contract with Phelps Construction Company Incorporated in the amount of $26,220 for the purchase of rock for Neocosta Stream restoration. Number five, Arkansas Department of Parks and Tourism Wildlife Observation Trail Grant. Resolution authorizing an application for an Arkansas Department of Parks and Tourism Wildlife Observation Trail Grant in an amount up to $100,000 for nature trail improvements at Lake Fayetteville. Number six, Bale Chevrolet of Little Rock, a resolution authorizing the purchase of 6 2011 police package Chevrolet Tahoes from Bale Chevrolet of Little Rock pursuant to a state procurement contract in the total amount of $200,250 for use by the police department. I will entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda as read.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to accept the consent agenda as read. Sandra, would you please call the roll?
Janet,
Yes.
Farrell,
Yes.
Adams,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Gray,
Yes.
Teal,
Yes.
Kenyon,
Yes.
Petty,
Yes.
Well, we have one item under unfinished business. In fact, that's all that we have on the agenda tonight. It should go relatively quickly. Always the positive. The glass is always half full. All right.
That is good.
Number one.
We'll ask it 11.
Yes. Amend Title 15, 80M09-3480, Streamside Protection Ordinance, amending Title 15, Unified Development Code of the City of Fayetteville to amend Chapter 155, Appeals, Chapter 156, Ordinances, and Chapter 168, Flood Damage Prevention Code, in order to establish streamside protection zones and adopt a protected streams map and best management practices manual. That was left on second reading. I will entertain a motion to go to the third and final reading.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to go to the third and final reading. Sandra, would you please call the roll?
Janet,
Yes.
Farrell,
Yes.
Adams,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Gray,
Yes.
Teal,
Yes.
Kenyon,
Yes.
Petty.
Yes.
An ordinance amending Title 15, Unified Development Code of the City of Fayetteville to amend Chapter 155 Appeals, Chapter 156 Variances, and Chapter 168 Flood Damage Prevention Code in order to establish streamside protection zones and adopt a protected streams map and best management practices manual.
Okay. Don?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to bring a motion to reconsider on the amendments that we passed last time. Alderman Lewis, who had done the most work and research on the ordinance and was not able to attend that meeting. So I would like for us to reconsider the woody vegetation. Woody vegetation. We took woody vegetation out, and I would like for us to reconsider that at this time.
Okay, we have a reconsideration of the woody vegetation amendment. Is that correct?
Yes.
There needs to be a second to her
second it.
motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Okay. Any discussion on that?
Well, I would ask that can we reread that language or for
the folks in the
Well,
room?
this
or
is
that-
simply to put it back on the table
Okay.
to discuss it again, so.
Okay. So I would say that, can I make a comment?
Sure.
Okay.
I suppose. This is-
I really support bringing back the language of woody vegetation. The intent of the ordinance as a whole is to establish a connected root system within banks that hold the soil in place. And without woody vegetation as one tool to do that, and one major tool to do that, you lose the deeply rooted and intertwined roots of plants. And yes, trees are definitely important, but you also need the understory. You need the shrubs, the service berries, and the small dogwoods, and the small saplings, and so on that are in those areas to have the deeply connected root system within that soil. Again, that's a service of holding the soil in place. And so without that, I think it reduces the intent of this. And yes, trees should be in there, but we also need a broader language that includes other types of woody vegetation.
Bobby?
Yes, Mayor, I remember that when we brought this up, prior to bringing it up, I had visited with, matter of fact, you had visited with a citizen that had some concerns, and I did also, and had asked the city engineer, that he came out and he brought Sarah with him and looked at it.
Sarah Reed.
Sarah Reed.
Yes, and said that, excuse me, I'm sorry.
That's a lot of Sarahs.
I'm surprised you weren't there, but anyway, they said they thought that there could be some language change in that, and then my recollection is that staff came back and staff recommended staff recommended the amendment, and that's when Matthew disaggregated our two amendments. But we voted on that amendment and passed it, and it was with staff recommendation. So I'd just like to bring everybody's memory back to what happened there.
Brenda?
I'm not sure we need to ask staff if they recommended that. I think we had asked that it be clarified and simplified. And I still feel that way. The way it was worded was non-invasive woody, and I don't have it right in front of me, but non-invasive woody vegetation. I think we wanted it to be a little simpler for people to interpret. And I also have a concern about, you know, we were contacted by someone that had a lot of concerns about the snakes and that sort of thing, if they didn't keep it somewhat clear. So I guess if we do this, we need to define non-invasive. And so that gets into a whole new thing, and I'm not opposed to that. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, what is non-invasive? To who? To what? I mean, and I think you're going to have to define what you want left there. And you also mentioned saplings. Well, my understanding was that no trees would be cut, so saplings would be in that category. So I think what we're talking about is honeysuckle, things like that, that we most know are invasive, but not everyone knows that that would be something they could cut. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I guess serviceberry is not invasive. I don't know. But see, that's it. I don't know. Well, so I think that there needs, if we're going to do this, we need to find a place somewhere in our code that defines non-invasive, and it may already be there in another section, and we can refer to that. You know, I don't know, but that's why we asked for the simplification of that, and I still feel like it ought to be. I will not support going back to it being read just like this, unless, or to it reading just like this, unless we do clarify what non-invasive is, or somehow clarify what can be allowed. And you know, I just think people are concerned about having to allow it to completely grow up, and I can understand that. I mean, definitely the trees need to stay and everything that can hold the banks, but Yeah, I don't think we want to go totally opposite with the other situation too, so.
Okay, Matthew?
Well, I think whenever it comes to the science, it's pretty clear that we do need more than trees in these riparian buffers. So coming at it from that angle, my concern last time, and the reason I separated the amendments, and I still have the concern today, is that we did the redefinition out of convenience, not necessarily to follow the intent of the ordinance. And that's fine sometimes, but I really think here it's important that we make an effort to come up with a definition that works. I don't think it's right for us to redefine it just because it's convenient. I think we should make an effort in finding that definition. And I think that we've already got a good start. When we passed the sustainable lawns ordinance last year, staff created a list of more than 300 native plants. And I don't think it would be very hard to take that list, which was comprehensive and staff put a lot of work into it, and find what the woody plants are and use that list. Basically, I think that just whenever it comes to this definition, I think we can do better than just redefining it to be only trees.
I have one quick question
Okay.
to that. And I don't have that list in front of me, so honeysuckle is not included in that list.
That would be a question for staff.
Do we have a list that has non-invasive plants that are allowed and invasive?
Karen, you have an answer for that.
Right. The Best Management Practices Manual includes some examples of invasive and non-invasive. It also directs people to a website that has a more comprehensive list. I think staff's recommendation for changing the language was, one, clarification for the average property owner, so that when they're out in their yard, they can quickly know whether they need to remove something or not without having to reference it necessarily. And the second issue was one of enforcement, in that we were unsure about how well staff could enforce if someone removed, for example, a rose bush, which would fall under woody vegetation, and then replaced it. And so that was the second concern. And that's why we changed it, because we thought trees were much clearer. But the science behind it is absolutely sound. I mean, I think everyone's in agreement on that. We thought that perhaps this also fell into an education component similar to pet waste or some of the other items that we all know are important but are very challenging to regulate.
So did the staff then support just the woody definition, the simplified version?
We had recommended changing it from woody vegetation to non-invasive trees. So what would be prohibited is the removal of non-invasive trees.
So let's see if we can work our way out.
Okay.
Sarah?
Well, I really appreciate Matt's comments, and I agree that there are already resources in place within the city code, within the city resources that can help define this. And I think that removing that language it takes away too much. It makes it so that it simplifies it to a point of error. And I think that if we don't keep the language of woody vegetation in there, we're losing a substantial part of this. And there are other examples within code. The Environmental Action Committee has compiled lists which is an advisory council to the council, has compiled lists of non-native and native plants. The resources are there. If there needs to be a more clear definition of that at the staff level, that's fine. But within the code, we can use language that is, in principle, what is the intent of this code, and woody vegetation supports that.
Okay.
Mayor?
Yes, Bob.
Just want to, in the best management practices on page C4, towards the bottom, it says, this is as originally came, removal of vegetation should also be considered when invasive species threaten to overrun or outcompete native trees and shrubs. Control of non-native exotic species or even invasive native species may be justified when this happens.
Okay.
And that's why sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay, that's exactly the intent of the best management practices, and it's defined really clearly in the code when to take that into consideration. And that's why the staff worked so hard on that document, is saying when there is a change requested in these types of areas, then the staff and the applicant can consider these types of things using the best management practices, and that's why that language was put in the best management practices.
Well, Mayor, can I say one more thing?
Yes.
We talked tonight about what a great job our staff's doing and they haven't added any staff. If we keep adding things, different projects, and we keep legislating mandates for our staff, we're not going to be able to take care of them. We're not going to be able to, there's going to be some laws that we're just not going to be able to have enough staff to go out there with the existing staff that we have. Thank you.
I guess then we talk about an enforcement issue. How would staff have any recommendations? I mean, how would you enforce this?
Well, I think the concern with simply saying woody vegetation was that it would be challenging. We were actually looking at more technical definitions. A non-herbaceous shrub, I think, was what we came up with, which obviously it's hard for me to even say. So, but I think the concern was that if it was a complaint-driven system, and say a neighbor said, well, my neighbor removed a shrub, a woody vegetation, it would be very challenging for staff to determine whether woody vegetation had actually been removed, particularly if it was just one shrub, both on the ground and then also if we were using an aerial view. And so trees are much easier to enforce in terms of determining whether something has happened or not. And so that was the concern about using the term woody vegetation and the enforcement side of it.
I think we need to look at the enforcement issue from a practical perspective. You know, let's face it, we aren't going to be sending staff out to snoop on neighbors who already own their property and aren't doing new development. This is a development that affects new developments. This is an ordinance that affects new developments. And every existing use is grandfathered in. The only time we're going to be sending staff out, practically speaking, is whenever there's a development permit up for review. And this is exactly the kind of thing that needs to be reviewed when we're looking at those permits. We need to be able, staff needs to have the authority to say, this is what you need to keep in your riparian buffer. And that needs to include more than just trees. From a practical perspective, all this affects is new developments, and the only time staff are going to be out there is for development permits. I don't think there's an enforcement issue with that.
Okay.
I want to say exactly the same thing. We're looking to the future here. We're planning for the future. So we're making a point in time of looking forward. And so I totally agree with that comment.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Brenda?
Well, I'll follow up about that. I mean, I agree wholeheartedly about new development, that needs to be part of that. But that is not what this limits this to. So you cannot say that this is just limited to new development, because that's not the way it reads. If we can make it read that way, where that's only in new development, then I would be fine with it. But
Well, can I
Karen,
comment
can I
on
say,
that?
go ahead.
The term future development, so existing uses are grandfathered in. And that's what, I think that's what the meaning there, at least that's how I interpret it, and that's what is written in the code, is that all existing uses can remain. If you decide to make a change within the riparian, within the Streamside Protection Ordinance, then these activities would be considered. So it's not just about future development, say if we annex something on the edge of town. It's about activities that are brought forward within these sensitive areas. And that may be, one example was someone wanted to build a deck or something. Well, if you want to do that, then these are sensitive areas within our geology. And the tasks and the activities within this code, which I think should include woody vegetation, should be part of the criteria that are considered in those changes to the landscape.
In new development.
In new development, meaning inside the middle of Fayetteville or wherever it is, it's new changes from here on out forward. Now, existing uses can continue. If this is something you've been doing and you your house is there, you have a footprint, then that, there's no effect of this on that. But this ordinance would address activities that change the hydrology in those sensitive areas. And woody vegetation would help to limit that, and staff should be able to consider that.
May I get the staff to clarify?
Sure, I was just fixing to go to them. Karen?
Yes.
The question, could I ask the question?
Yes, ma'am.
The question here then would be that if you had a piece of property, you weren't developing it or anything, and you chose to go down and cut a shrub or something, you could do that.
Well,
That's what you're saying, right?
I think staff's interpretation was that if you were to cut down, the ordinance as amended, if you were to cut down a tree.
I'm saying if we amend it, but yeah.
Right, but if you were to cut down a tree, for example, that would be a new activity. I mean, unless you're in the middle of cutting a tree down right now, you could complete it, but if you were to cut a new tree,
right.
and I think that we would look at woody vegetation in the same way.
But if we go back to okay, so in other words, this does affect existing property. I mean, that's not being developed. That's what she just said, right?
The intent is to protect those areas along the bank and maintain those root systems. If they're already, essentially, this says if they're already cleared, you don't have to change it.
Okay.
But this community, through this ordinance, would say, please leave those roots in place using woody vegetation.
Okay.
Has everybody got it? Okay. Well, let's take a little public comment. Now,
just on the amendment.
Well,
I got it.
you know, maybe before we really get into public comment on the amendment, there ought to be a vote on the motion to reconsider, because, you know, the amendment's not on the floor until the motion to reconsider has been approved.
Well,
if it's not going to be approved, then there's nothing for the public to comment on.
Oh.
Okay.
Can I say one more thing then, Mayor, if we're gonna vote that way?
Yes.
I just say, we passed this thing, the council passed it, and the staff agreed with it, so, let's keep, thanks.
Okay. We have a motion, do we have a motion and a second to reconsider? We've done that, haven't we? Okay. My fault, I should have taken that vote already. Sandra, would you please call the roll?
Tennant,
No.
Farrell,
No.
Adams,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Gray,
Yes.
Teal,
Yes.
Kenyon,
Yes.
Petty.
Yes.
Okay, that amendment is now on the floor, Mayor.
All right, now we can take public comment. Now, I want everybody to stay hooked on this woody vegetation amendment. Don't get off on the ordinance and all this other stuff. There's going to be plenty of time for you to bring all that out later. I want to stay with the woody vegetation amendment. Has everybody got that? Now, y'all quit that giggling out there. I want you to stay with this woody. Now, I want y'all to understand something. We had 3 hours of public comment the first night that we did public comment. We had 4 hours at the last session. We've heard most of the arguments. I want you to stay hooked on this. There'll probably be this. There may be a couple of more minutes. So don't take a lot of time. I'm going to give you a little bit of time to say whether you're in support of this thing, give a couple of brief comments, and then I want you to be brief and please go to your seat, give everybody a chance to speak. So let's stay with the woody vegetation amendment. Everybody's got that, right? Okay, you get one turn at the microphone unless an alderman brings you back to ask you questions. You do not engage alderman or staff. You talk directly to me. Everybody got that? Okay. Here we go. Introduce yourself.
Mr. Mayor, my name is David Orr. I live at 1564 West Cedar in Fayetteville. I strongly support retaining the original language that was in the ordinance prior to the amendment. The amendment was made 2 weeks ago following our multi-hour hearing, and it did not give anyone an opportunity to look at what effects that had. And in the subsequent 2-week period, I've talked to a lot of people and have concluded that the intent and the language of the original ordinance is what we need to stay with. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Who else?
Mr. Mayor. I'm Monty Henderson. I live and my wife and I live at 2111 Brookhaven Drive, which is just off of Old Missouri Road. And we own property that is just north of where Stubblefield runs into Old Missouri. And there's a small losing stream that runs underground in the summertime that runs along the edge of Old Missouri Road there, that runs along the edge of our property across Brookhaven and down to Mud Creek. And what we do with that, we've lived there for 15 years, and during that 15-year period of time, we bush hog the flat area once a month during the summertime for aesthetics, and of course the bush hog is fairly high mowing. It would fit the mowing part of it, but we bush hog that area flat once a month. And then in November each year, we weed eat the hillside that runs north along that creek there, and we put our Christmas angels out. We decorate that hillside for Christmas. It goes along the creek there, put some of them down at the creek. And I am not opposed to the ordinance as amended, but the question about woody plants I'm very much opposed to, because when we weed eat, little sprouts that come up, little persimmon bushes, little things that grow up naturally along with the honeysuckles and the sawbriars and the poison oak and everything else, we weed eat that all down. And it's reasonable height. But we have good grass cover on that hill. We don't have erosion. And I understand the value of a riparian buffer, and I understand where Councilman Lewis is coming from. But we believe that we need to maintain our property. I don't want that hillside, which is part of my yard. It's an extension of my yard. But I don't want that hillside to look like a South Arkansas clear cut, if you know what I'm talking about, that's grown up in sawbriars and weeds and blackberry vines and all that. And that's what will happen if I'm not allowed to weed eat that hillside down. And I don't know how, and I want to thank the city engineer for coming out in the snow and looking at the property and agreeing that the language could be modified. And I am not opposed to the ordinance as amended, but I am opposed to staff members having to make a decision on every kind of little sprout that grows up and every kind of little, whether it's invasive or not invasive, whether it's approved or not approved. Because when you weed eat the hillside, you weed eat the hillside. And of course, we leave all of the dogwoods and all of our trees, and we care a lot about our trees. We lost 25 or 30 trees during the ice storm that we had to take out. But we've got good grass cover on the hill, and there's no erosion on the hill. But we'd like to continue to weed eat that hillside once a year and put our angels out and decorate that. It's aesthetically nice, and we think it's important that we don't let that area along there of Old Missouri Road grow up and look like a South Arkansas clear cut. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Hang on just a minute. Wait just a minute. Karen, do you have an answer for him on that? I mean, isn't it, if they're maintaining it a certain way now, that they're grandfathered in to continue to maintain it after this is passed?
That's correct.
So,
I want to be sure we got that out there.
well, I guess that's what I was gonna say, because I heard you say it was each year you did,
Yes,
each
ma'am.
year you do
That's
that.
what it
Those kinds of activities, with the way this is written,
See, I didn't read that. I didn't read that into it. I didn't read that it was grandfathered.
Okay, hang on. Karen?
Right, I think that there was confusion because that is correct, that every
That's what I
current use
thought.
is grandfathered in. But I think the confusion was that it also it said at the last reading, removal of woody vegetation. And I think that that's where there needed to be some clarification.
So he would be allowed to continue the same practice?
Exactly.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
No, that's what I remember too.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is Kyle Johnson. I just have a question of clarification, and maybe Ms. Mingle can help me with this. But does the reversal of your decision from last week by this vote that you've just taken, does that mean that any new act by a property owner, such as building a deck or putting in a swimming pool or whatever, triggers the new ordinance and all implications of it, just as if it was new development, and that would mean it's no longer grandfathered?
That would be considered a new use.
A new use, so it would not be grandfathered.
Correct. So if an existing property today, if they decided to build a pool a year from now, it would have to go through the permit process. It would fall under this ordinance.
Or a deck, or anything
that required
within
a
that
building
buffer
permit.
zone.
That's right.
That's correct.
Okay, so we've effectively wiped that out with this vote. What we decided last week, or last meeting.
No.
This is only about bushes. This is not about decks or swimming pools.
Okay. I'm not sure that's the answer I wanted, but I'll take it. Thank you.
Okay. Sir.
Well, just to, I guess to clarify, right now, this amendment would put back in language that would ask staff or tell staff to consider the woody vegetation when looking at projects that come before them, and have that part of the criteria in considering those changes. So woody vegetation is what is on the table as being put back into the ordinance as part of what is considered.
Okay. Come on.
Jim Lobler from West Fayetteville. My objection to this is what you're seeing. I saw this on TV last week by a representative of the city, and I've heard this from our scholar in this information, and nobody can understand what the paragraph is saying. It always sounds like, well, but, well, no. No, you're okay, but. This is what's wrong with this. It's the verbiage. It's the representation. We don't know what's the truth. And I would challenge you, don't take my word for it. Just rewind the video, get the news, get the news, look at the newsreel from a couple weeks ago, and you'll see it. They're saying one thing, but then they're saying it differently the next time. And I think it's clear enough. And I believe half of you have experienced that already.
Thank you. Who's next?
Hey, my name is Joe Alexander. I'd like to make 2 comments about the woody vegetation part of this ordinance. And that's, I've done a lot of hiking out in the hills here in the Ozarks, and I've seen many places where there's woods along a creek. You know, it's all natural. Hardly anybody does anything in that wooded area. And I've seen many places along creeks where the creek has eroded the soil right under a tree so that you have the tree roots hanging bare out over the creek. And so woody vegetation is and I've also seen many places on the sides of the hills where there's a deep gully worn in the side of the hill by the water erosion, even though it's all grown up in woods all around it with soil roots supposedly holding the soil. So the woody plants might hold back erosion somewhat, but they sure don't prevent it altogether. So you shouldn't expect to prevent erosion altogether by this means. Maybe you can slow it down a little bit. Plus, from what I've seen here in Fayetteville, about 95% of the time, people let the land around the creeks grow up in woods and bushes and everything anyway, without any legislation forcing them to do it. So I think there's no need to pass legislation to force people to do what people naturally do already. That's what I have to say.
Thank you. Who's next?
Hi, my name is Eden Reef. I own some Streamside property. I think the part about the woody vegetation is essential. I mean, this goes through my yard, so I'm very concerned about how it looks and also about the health of the stream. And I have 2 small children. I'm concerned about, safety and all that sort of thing. And you can do it. I mean, it clearly states that this is invasive species we're talking about. You can get rid of your invasive species. You can continue your existing uses. I think it's clear to me, if you carefully read the ordinance, that this is okay. We can do this. We can have attractive lawns that are support a healthy stream.
Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Angie Albright. I'm a Ward 1 resident and a member of the city's Environmental Action Committee. And I'm going to say something a little different than I did last time. I'm here to support the ordinance as it was originally written. We need to retain the language of woody vegetation. It's the responsibility of the authors of the ordinance and the best practices manual to write clearly and in language that we can understand, and they've certainly done that. But it's also the citizens' responsibility to ask questions and investigate any elements of an ordinance or a law that they don't understand, that they think applies to them. It's not realistic to think that we could write every single ordinance in such a way that every single citizen could understand it perfectly. When I think about our construction ordinances and permits and things like that, those are for the experts. I couldn't possibly understand that, but I can read criminal code because that's something I work on. So we have to rely on the experts who put these things together, and we have to believe in their good faith efforts and recognize the hard work they did to make this correct. So we have to have ordinances that are technically correct and that are readable, which this is, but we also have to have citizens and owners, property owners, who are responsible for investigating aspects they don't understand. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hey, ma'am.
Yes, Bob.
Ma'am. I just wanted to make a comment. When you were talking about passing these things, you say they're not perfect, and I understand that.
I didn't say they were perfect. I didn't say that.
No, I said you said
Okay.
you said they need tweaking sometimes. If I understood you correct, did I understand you correctly?
No, that's not what I said. No, I said that citizens cannot possibly understand every single ordinance we have on the books perfectly.
Okay.
I mean, we all have different areas of expertise. We have different levels of reading skills. Certainly not, most of us aren't interested in most of it, frankly. So we're not going to understand every single ordinance. We have to be responsible for the things that we care about. We have to investigate and ask questions and make sure we understand things like woody vegetation. That is the correct technical term to use. And if we're not sure what that is, and it is defined in other places, then we have to ask the question, not rely on all of these documents to explain everything to every single person. It's not possible.
You need to ask the question before it becomes law or after it becomes law?
Both.
Both?
Yeah.
I was just going to say there's a third thing that enters when you pass legislation like this, whether there's an intent or not. There are predatory litigators, and there are also litigators that think that they have a good cause. So we have to really take this into consideration when we're thinking about passing legislation here.
Oh, absolutely. But the phrase woody vegetation, what I'm driving at is that technical, accurate language is what matters.
Let's move this along a little bit here. Come on.
I want to ask if I have stumps in my yard and I want
to... Would you introduce yourself, please?
My name is Mary Larson. I want to know, do I fit underneath the grandfather clause for taking out the stumps that are in the yard?
Okay.
The question was, would taking out a stump be prohibited?
Yeah.
In the best management practices manual, it talks about leaving the stumps intact if it's on the stream side. And even if you're clearing the drainage channel. The exception would be if somehow that is prohibiting drainage capacity, you could take out the stump. But in general, you would leave the stump intact, unless it was a hazard to public safety.
Well, I mean, they're like in the middle of the yard. There's no problem with the drainage.
If it's in, Mayor, if it's in the buffer area, then we want to leave this stump there so the roots hold the bank intact.
So I guess the answer to your question would be no.
I know where it is.
I'm Bill Ettridge. I live at 3340 North Old Missouri Road. I'm almost across the road from the gentleman here that lives on Brookhaven. There's a little drainage that runs right through my front yard. It comes and runs under Old Missouri Road into the creek. And I think the creek across the road may be named if it does. I've only lived there since '87, but I don't know the name of it. But I'm not even sure that water that runs through my yard is actually considered a creek, because I'm not sure what y'all consider a tributary, a river, or creek, or branch, or whatever. But 50 feet on the north side of this water that runs through my yard takes in my driveway. And I only have about 15 or 18 feet of yard between on the south side of my driveway and the creek, and I mow right to that creek, because that's my front yard. And I want to be sure that I'm able to keep my yard mowed and as good as it is right now. There is some vegetation across the creek, which the hill runs up pretty steep on the other side of that, and I don't intend to clear that or cut anything out. But if a tree falls, I do go in there and clean it out, because it's my front yard.
Right. So those existing uses, the way this was written, the existing uses can continue.
Yes.
The mowing can continue. So the current activities, if those are all...
Well, I mow right to the creek bank, because the creek is...
Well, if you're interested, this project would put forward a best management practices manual that if you were interested, you could use it. But all existing activities, the way this is written, could continue.
That's right.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, you may.
So, what if this gentleman sells his property to somebody else? Would they be able to continue to do that?
The way this is written, yes.
The answer is yes.
Well, my front, where I front on my yard, my land is wider on the back than it is on the front.
Right.
And I'm probably only 250 feet on Old Missouri Road. So 100, and this little branch, I really call it, it's really a drainage ditch, because it only runs when you have a lot of rain.
I'm just making sure you can keep doing what you're doing, and that the new owners, the next time that buy your house, can keep doing it.
And they would be able to.
And they would be able to do it.
I have a question for you. We're talking about the woody vegetation only right now, so I'm wondering how that's...
Well, when you start talking about mowing, you get into a lot of different aspects.
There's one huge tree, and I don't intend to cut that tree. And there's 2 or 3, smaller flowering type trees.
Mr. Esther, would you be able to do
I don't intend to cut them too, but sometimes part of them dies off, and I want to clean. I want to clean them up.
Would you be able to do that?
Yeah.
Okay. No. Thank you.
Thank you. Who would be next? No one? Okay. Okay. There we go.
I'm Charles Taunton. I live at 2900 North Pyrite Drive. My property backs up to the Cement Creek. There's a dead or dying redbud in the middle of my backyard. Inside my fence, about halfway between the house and the fence, which makes it a third of the way between me and the creek bank, but it's well within the 50 feet. What can I legally do with that tree? Am I required to leave it? Can I cut it down? Can I replace it? What's the procedure?
Okay. Karen?
Right, so I'm going to go ahead and read from the actual ordinance. If you are in the waterside zone, which is 0 to 25 feet, it's not the 0 to 50 feet, you can remove dead vegetation, but we ask you to follow the best management practices manual. So in that case, unless it's a reason, so you could absolutely cut down the tree if it's dying, or there's some kind of infestation, or it's a public safety hazard. What the best management practices manual says is that if you're within that first 25 feet, then we want you to leave, then you need to leave the stump intact. If you're outside of the 25 feet, more than 25 feet, then you could remove the stump, but we would encourage you to leave it intact because its roots are doing something for the buffer area.
And the top of that, I'm sorry, sir.
Go ahead.
And the top of that concrete wall, the cement ditch, creek, is where that 25-foot buffer zone starts. Yes, no? Is it?
Yes or no?
It's on a hillside slope.
So again, I just want to state for everyone here, you're measuring from the top of bank. In this case, it sounds like it is the top of bank, but it is meant to be done on a case-by-case basis, so we actually like to view the property.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Folks, let's stay with woody vegetation. I mean, I know y'all want to talk a little bit about trees and stuff. We got plenty of time to talk about trees later on. Let's stay with the sprouts right now. Okay, and what you've been doing.
Shrubs.
Mayor, my name is Matt Goki, residents here east Fayetteville. Great job, by the way, on the manual here. I think the intent's very, very good.
I'm sorry, did you introduce yourself?
Yes, I did. Matt Goki. Matt. I am a property owner that kisses up or right up to the creek here, off of the same place these guys are. I have a pool that's now cut in the middle of the 50 foot because my bank is higher than the 5%. It cuts right there. I understand I'll be able to enjoy that pool for a while. My concern and questions about woody vegetation, it's twofold. I lost 6 trees along that area. A couple of them were big. I had to get stump grinder to get them out of there. I question whether I'd be able to do that in the future because I want to have a smooth bank. When you lose a big tree, it creates a big hole in the ground as it rots out. You can backfill, I understand that. So the question is on pertaining to tree removal and stump grinding. Sounds as though I wouldn't be able to do that in this woody vegetation. My question really to the group is very high transit area in the Savannah subdivision with a lot of corporate people. We come in and out. We pay a high dollar as property for all of us is due. If the person beside me who lives there today elects to keep their mowed, their land clean, the next person that comes behind them elects to let it grow up. Okay? Because everybody takes care of their property. Within this 50 feet, what happens as a homeowner to the person beside me who lets that grow up? And then they want to sell that property. Can that next homeowner come in and bush hog and cut that back down? So this goes over houses over years and people turning and selling their houses. And someone lets it grow up. Does it get grandfathered in because they bought it when it was high? Or they grandfathered out because the person who they bought it from let it grow and no longer can get it. So I want to understand this through the grandfather clause, which I think someone's already articulated. It's very gray. So if you could help me understand that, because as a pool owner, snakes are just big time for us. I have 2 small children that play there. So it's about the grandfathering clause of someone within that area who sells their property. The new homeowner lets it grow up. The next person they sell it to wants to come into that property and cut it back down. What's the clause or what's the clarity on that for me, please?
The grandfathering, just like all grandfathering of non-conforming uses, if you quit doing the use, if you stop maintaining the property.
Yes, sir.
For a period of time, and for animal husbandry, it's 18 months. But
okay.
If it's just regular, I'm not sure exactly how long. But if they quit for a number of years mowing up to the creek bed,
right.
Then at that point, that use will have been lost to the next homeowner, or even this homeowner, if they quit maintaining their property.
That's what I thought. Hence my reason why I'm against the proposal.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else on the woody vegetation? Okay. All right.
I'm Louise Mann. I live at 629 Gray Avenue. I'd like to encourage you to pass the ordinance in the original language and leave the woody vegetation in. Hillside, water, it's all the same. When we do something, there's a ripple effect. I've spent $40,000 on my property on pier and drainage work. Woody vegetation was removed around me, and it caused a lot of drainage on my property. So I would like to see you pass the ordinance in the original language and put the woody vegetation back in. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. Anybody else now? Okay, Aubrey.
Aubrey Shepherd, I think this is an appropriate moment to say that woody vegetation is fine, but many of us hoping that it would say recommend only native species of those areas. That disappeared months ago. But certainly many of the best things to hold the water in are lesser plants than trees. Button bushes, willows, and many others that we can think of here are excellent. Some of the non-natives do that job, but they're not good for the environment in other ways. So I would like the language to be as inclusive as possible for the woody vegetation. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else on this? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the council. All right. What do we got here?
Well, I would like to move that we amend it to include woody vegetation. Am I allowed to do that if I'm not the one that brought it up?
I think we're already considering.
It's actually, I think that's back on the table.
Okay.
We did reconsider.
And actually, the amendment that's back on the table is the amendment to remove the woody vegetation. That's what's being reconsidered, so that if you want to keep it as it was 2 weeks ago, you vote yes to have the amendment to remove the reference to woody vegetation. If you do not, if you wish it to be as it originally read before the amendment, then you would vote no. Because the amendment that was passed at the last meeting is on the table again for consideration, and the amendment would be to remove the reference to woody vegetation.
Question, Mayor.
Yes.
So if we want to do what the vast majority of the public speakers said, which is keep the amendment, then we vote no? Is that what you're saying?
No, because that amendment is before you. If you wish to have the amendment to remove the woody vegetation, you would vote yes.
Okay. Well,
if you want to pass the amendment that was passed previously, then you would vote in favor of the amendment, which previously passed and now is being reconsidered.
Maybe someone could state the...
Hey, y'all, I don't want any public outbursts here.
It was, the amendment was to remove from subsection 2C, that in fact, to totally remove that which prohibited the clearing of non-invasive woody vegetation. The amendment would be to remove that subsection, so that would no longer be prohibited.
So if you want to go back to the original, you vote no.
Yes, if you do not want to remove that, then you would vote no.
Right.
That was my question.
Everybody got that?
Let's make sure. Does everybody understand? Yes, a yes vote would change it the way you changed it at the last meeting. It would remove this particular clause, the clearing of non-invasive woody vegetation. A no vote means that that proposed amendment fails, and therefore the ordinance reads as it did originally.
That's right.
A no vote takes it back how it was originally.
That's right.
That's correct.
Okay, we are, yes.
That amendment will fail, and therefore it did not change the original
And I'm also busy.
provision.
So yes, if you're against it, and no
Yes,
if
if
you're
you want
for
to
it.
remove woody vegetation.
Mayor.
Hang on. If you want to leave it like it originally was, you vote no.
That's correct.
Has everybody got that?
Yes.
Yes, Don.
I just was going to make a comment, because as we Twitter the meetings, we get various comments. So just to be clear to the public, what has happened, your first motion was to reconsider a previously approved motion which removed woody vegetation. When you voted to reconsider that and it passed, that motion became active on the table again, as if you had never passed it. So the reason you vote yes if you want to remove it is because it's in essence as if you're having this conversation all over again. And if you do not want that removed, you would vote no. So it's the reconsideration of the original motion, which was to remove it.
If you want it the way it originally was, vote no. Otherwise, you want to do the opposite. Everybody got that?
No, wait a minute, Mayor. The way it originally came out.
That's right. You vote no.
As
Okay,
originally presented at the first meeting.
We vote yes if we want it to stay as amended.
That's right.
That's correct.
Okay. So we're yes or right.
Has everybody got this? Okay.
That's a
I
convoluted deal.
move that we,
Well, you don't want to move in favor of
Oh.
that.
no.
Bobby, or who made the original, well, does somebody want to make that motion
I'm
again?
touching that.
To what?
The motion is to remove the language in subsection 2C, clearing of non-invasive woody vegetation. Unless you can remember who made the original motion and second, we could probably get a second motion and second here to pass that as an amendment by someone that is in favor of removing this language.
I thought we were already in the midst of considering this amendment.
We are. She needs a motion and a second. It would be back to the original motioner and seconder, but I don't know if she knows that now, so if we could certainly have another one at this point in time.
I'm not the attorney.
So someone that is in favor of moving that we remove this particular clause, would you make a motion that we would do that?
Mayor?
Yes,
I was just going to say the proposal that staff had last week that was voted on was changing the language, not just removing it. So it was changing it from clearing of non-invasive woody vegetation to clearing of non-invasive trees.
Yes, thank you.
So the motion would be clearing of
Okay,
non-invasive trees.
that would be their motion.
And the people that moved that and the motion and second was Teal and Kenyon.
Okay, then as long as she knows who it was, then we don't need another one. We're ready to vote.
Reconsider.
That was the motion to amend the ordinance last time. That's who made the motion to amend
Yeah, but I
last
got a
meeting.
question here.
So at this point then, we are ready to vote.
Can I, go ahead.
Yes. Has everybody got it?
Yeah.
I have a procedural question.
All right.
Kit, for a motion to reconsider, who has to make the motion for reconsideration?
It has to be someone that voted in the majority at the previous meeting.
Nadella did that.
Okay. But the second makes no difference?
Second does not make any difference.
Okay. One more time, I'm sorry, but these things keep changing.
Let Karen read what the motion is.
So the motion would be to change the language in 2C from clearing of non-invasive woody vegetation to clearing of non-invasive trees.
Would it be appropriate for me to withdraw my second because
No.
I don't want to second the change after I've got more educated during the week.
Just vote no, wouldn't you?
Or do I just vote no?
You could just vote no.
Okay.
Might make it a little bit easier procedurally.
I just want to be sure we all got this before we start off here.
So if we want to stay with
I wonder if
the
I have-
non-invasive trees,
The way that Karen read, yes, the one that passed last time, you would vote yes again.
Yeah.
Same way.
If you like what we got, you just vote yes again. If you want it to go back to the original, you vote no.
let her rip. Let's go. Let her rip.
All right, Sandra, have we got this? Are you ready to call the roll? Okay. Would you please call the roll?
Tennant?
Yes.
Farrell?
Yes.
Adams?
No.
Lewis?
No.
Gray?
No.
Teal?
No.
Kenyon?
No.
Petty?
No.
Okay. Stop.
This thing's greased, it's going through.
Do not do that. All right. Now, we are back to the original ordinance. Is that correct?
It has been, there was one amendment, but unless I hear anything else, I've not heard a motion to reconsider that one.
All right. Is there any other amendments to this? Okay. Any other comments,
Mayor,
conversations among the council?
Excuse
before-
me, when you said is there any other amendments, I may offer an amendment, but I don't have to do it right now, do I?
You don't have to.
Yeah, okay.
Be nice if you did.
But before they consider the final one, you might
Yeah,
have
you're
all
gonna
the
have to do that
ordinances
before you
forward.
consider the
I
final.
mean, all the
He's getting
amendments
ready to hear
forward.
the public about the final.
But I guess you could offer that after you hear from the public, right?
Well, wait,
Right?
wait,
Yeah.
let's just go ahead and get, I would move to amend
All right.
the amended ordinance.
Take one and hand it down.
Okay.
Do you want me to read that, Ms. Alderman Farrell?
You go ahead.
Okay. Alderman Farrell is moving to amend a portion of the applicability section of the ordinance to put in a new subsection 4, which would read, any landowner whose property is on one or both streamside protection zones can opt out of all regulations imposed by Section 168.12 streamside protection zones by submitting a written notification to the Fayetteville City Engineering Division.
So there's, explain it, Bob.
This just means, Mayor, that I would have preferred to have had an opt-in, which means,
A volunteer program, basically?
well, yeah, if it was an opt-in, you would have to, if it passed, then you wouldn't have to do anything. But opt-out means it's active on the part of the citizen. If the citizen does not want their property inside the riparian zone, then they could send a letter to the city engineer saying they elect to opt out of their property being involved in this riparian zone. That's the ordinance of the amendment. Kit, did I miss anything? And I think Kit's covered it. Everybody should have a copy of it.
All righty then. All right, what discussion do we have among the council? Anything?
Well, has it been proposed?
I'm sorry, he's made a motion.
Yes, I
There
moved
needs to
that
be a
we
second.
I'm sorry. We have a motion, do we have a second?
Sure somebody ain't real horse?
We have no second.
Okay. Just
All
trying
right.
to keep us from being sued.
Okay, now we are ready to discuss the ordinance as it has been amended. Everybody good with that? Okay, before everybody just gets running up here now. I want everybody to be as brief as you can be tonight. Now, we've heard 7 hours of public comment on this now.
I don't have a copy. I
You can get up there and pretty much state whether you're for it or against it. There's a few questions that we can answer through the staff like we've been doing, like stump removal and that sort of thing. We will answer those the best we can. We have an amendment. You get one turn at the microphone. Be brief. Do not engage in debate or any kind of derogatory remarks, or do not engage the staff. Be courteous. Be brief. And here we go. An alderman can bring you back for questions. All right, everybody ready? Okay, here we go.
Mr. Mayor, my name is Steve Smith. I live at 2862 North Pyrite Drive in Ward 4 of Fayetteville. I also represent the houses on Pyrite Drive for the Crystal Springs Homeowners Association. I think our particular street is unique in one way, but also is probably representative of other sections of Fayetteville. Our street has a concrete line drainage ditch that goes behind our houses. It is 55 feet from my back door to the start of that ditch. Some of the other houses on my street, it's much less than that. A lot of people, their entire backyard would be in this riparian zone. And as we've talked amongst ourselves as neighbors, there's no one who is arguing against the intent of this ordinance. We just would like to see it applied proportionately to property owners. In other words, you're taking, and I know the word taking is kind of in contention, but as the gentleman told me, if it doesn't meet the legal definition of taking, it sure feels like it to me. So, you're taking between 85 and 100% of people's backyards, whereas if someone had a large tract of land, a golf course, an industrial park, a developer had a new housing addition, it would be taking much, much less than that, 1, 2, 7, 10%. I sent you all an email with some figures about a quarter section and broke it all the way down. One other point of contention that we have is that if the houses on the east side of Pyrite Drive, where our backyards back up to this drainage ditch, if that requires a riparian zone, I hope I don't pronounce that wrong, then why wouldn't our neighbors across the street? Because the water that flows from our backyard into that ditch, if it's polluted and it needs that zone, our neighbors across the street, their front yard, the water flows off of that into the curb and gutter system, into a channel right next to my house, and flows into the very same drainage ditch. I'd like to pass these pictures around. Could I bring them up to you? It kind of points out where we're talking about.
Karen, do you have any answers from Mr. Smith?
Right. Mr. Smith, and I have corresponded by email, I believe, because I know he wrote a letter to the council about this issue. And one thing I wanted to point out is that first, that type of ditch would no longer be constructed where it's lined in concrete, so that has now changed. But we looked at that particular situation, and the first point I wanted to make was that the majority of the regulations are really around the first 25 feet. Anything that those property owners are currently doing, they can continue to do. The reason we thought the buffer needed to apply to the property was because in case it ever redeveloped or there was a new use that was going to create a lot of impervious surface or destabilize that bank, it still was important that you had a buffer there filtering out pollutants and stabilizing the bank so that additional sediment was not getting into the waterway.
Yeah, well, Mr. Mayor, I'd also like to point out that at the end of that concrete drainage ditch, there's a 1 acre stormwater detention pond, which was obviously laid out very well by the city. And I believe that that pond is performing the same functionality that we're asking of the property owners. And it just doesn't make sense in a platted subdivision with 1/4 acre lots to ask people to give up their entire backyard.
Sarah?
I guess my question is, you can continue, those kinds of activities can continue. What you're doing there can continue. So what is it that you would want to do as a property owner that would be affected?
Well, Mr. Mayor, the question, what would we like to do? There's several people from my street that are here, and they're all going to get their turn, but a lot of people want several different things. There's a gentleman on my street who promised his wife that he would build a sunroom when he moved into the house. And since his entire yard is in this zone, he could only build 10 feet out from his house, which would make a very long and skinny sunroom. Myself, I would like to build a covered porch that's stuck out more than 10 feet. You know, with all the talk of the woody vegetation, the snakes and all that stuff, that's a concern. There's a lot of children in the neighborhood. Myself, I have 3 small children also, but I think the building, you know, and there's a lot of talk about, hey, this only affects new development. Well, it affects current property owners if they want to make a change to their property in the form of an addition or you know, accessory structure, whatever they call it now. You know, that's going to affect them. And when we bought our houses on this street, if we had known that this was going to happen, a lot of us probably would have passed and gone to a different house. I mean, I bought my house 2 years ago. And if I had known this was coming up, I probably would have passed on a different one because I sure had my pick back then.
Lionel?
I have a question for you. So if he wants to build a sunroom on his house, and this passes, let's say 6 months from now, he wants to build a sunroom on his house, he would have to do what? Go through the variance process?
Yes.
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 And that would be decided possibly that he could build it?
That's correct.
Yes.
In fact, if it was turned down, it could very well be that the city council would make the final decision on the variance.
That's right. Go ahead, Karen.
I was going to say one of the options in that variance procedure is that the Planning Commission could require mitigation efforts. So if you are extending into that buffer area, then there's something additional you need to do to ensure that you're not increasing the pollutants that are running off into that stream.
Thank you.
All right, anybody else for Ms. Are you going to ask? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Thank you.
Sarah, did you have something there?
No. Thank you. Mr. Smith had come to Ward 4, and I appreciate that.
Thank you. Leah.
Good evening. My name is Delia Hawk. I run the Illinois River Watershed Partnership, and I want to thank Mr. Bob Kosek for allowing me to speak. I wanted to clarify to the mayor, Mayor Jordan, and the council an issue that was brought up at the last meeting concerning the position of the partnership. As you are aware, the partnership was formed, and you all are a sponsor of it, to be a nonprofit organization that represents 6 different stakeholder groups that supports and advocates for voluntary efforts both in the rural and in the urban settings in our watershed here in Arkansas and Oklahoma. And so we want to thank the council for your support of our efforts in education and outreach and water quality monitoring and in conservation and restoration projects. I know not this Saturday, but the following, we'll be planting 1,000 seedlings in Gully Park, native species, green ash, sugarberry, and willow oaks. And those efforts, that's the 4th year we'll be doing that along streams in Fayetteville, along with 6 other locations in the watershed. So our organization continues to advocate and support best management practices in the urban and rural areas of our watershed. And just to kind of give you, I know I'm often asked many times, I'm not a resident of Fayetteville. I am a resident of Benton County, not even of a city jurisdiction, but we serve over 20 jurisdictions, municipalities in the watershed, 7 counties, 2 states. It's a wide 1.1 million acres that we're all trying to help protect and preserve. So we have land along creek that we've enrolled 7 acres, our farm, into a conservation reserve enhancement program, putting in native hardwoods, fencing, alternative watering systems, and so on. So I don't want to stand before you as someone that isn't trying to do the right thing as well in implementing best management practices. So I know it's a hard decision that you all face. It's up to the citizens of Fayetteville, which you represent and are taking the vote. And I wanted to clarify my own personal position and that of the partnership for you this evening. If anybody has any questions, I know we had sent a letter, but we wanted to have that on the record as well.
I understand that the letter says, just for the public, and I want to be sure I get this right, that you're a nonprofit organization and you can't take a position either for or against legislation. Is that correct?
So my statement tonight is not either endorsing or opposing any legislation.
You are an educational group.
Yes, sir.
And being nonprofits, you can't take position on legislation.
That is correct.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, my name is Bob Cossey. I live at 8452 LaRue Road in the Rocky Branch area on Beaver Lake. Personal feelings abound on this issue. However, tonight I'm going to talk about facts, just plain provable facts. Other cities and surrounding states have implemented ordinances of this type, more restrictive even. To name the ones I'm aware of, Alpharetta, Georgia, population 50,000, Lenexa, Kansas, population 50,000, and Columbia, Missouri, population 100,000. These ordinances have been in effect for some time in these cities, yet they all report little or no change in phosphorus levels in their runoff. So they have been basically ineffective. So I ask, what makes you think your ordinance would be any different? Bella Vista, Arkansas, a local city of some 30,000 residents, has 7 private lakes of various sizes with wall-to-wall homes around them on lots of 3/4 of an acre or less, and all on septic tanks. Many elaborate methods of testing the waters of these lakes, including a thermal mapping to the tune of $60,000, were conducted, and no problems were discovered. Some E. coli bacteria was discovered on the beaches of 1 or 2 of the lakes, and that was traced to large flocks of resident Canadian geese. A reduction of the flock size and the oiling of the eggs and nests prevented propagation and corrected this problem. Some runoff of commercial fertilizer from adjacent yards was recognized, and a program of public instruction has corrected this problem. In fact, in some cases, they had to add fertilizer to the lakes to bring nutrient levels up to promote some algae growth, thus bait fish growth, and thus game fish growth. There is a balance. If you want crystal clear water, you will have a low fish propagation program and poor fishing. This all has been accomplished by public education. Next, we have the Illinois River and its watershed. This is being managed by the Illinois River Watershed Partnership. You heard from Delia Hawk just now. They are doing an outstanding job of reducing the nutrient level in the Illinois River, all through educating the public and with no ordinance. Additionally, the Northwest Arkansas Property Owners Association would like to go on record as supporting an educational program similar to Lake Smart, and I think I sent you all a copy of that. We think the ordinance route will be non-productive based on past experience and could cause you some serious legal problems since you are fooling with your citizens' civil rights. Another new local organization, the Beaver Lake Watershed Alliance, has stressed as part of their bylaws that they will encourage education and volunteerism and not ordinances. They are using the Illinois River Watershed Partnership as a role model. wonder just how many, speaking in favor of this ordinance here tonight, actually own property in the affected area or on one of the lakes. I'd say let them so state when they stand up to speak. I also wonder just how many of you would favor having a public walking or biking trail across your backyard. Out of this group of 1,300 affected citizens, most are well educated and have both the means and the knowledge to bring you back to reality. In my opinion, this ordinance is nothing more than a product of the Beaver Water District attempting to get their toe in the door and eventually control the entire Beaver Lake watershed. We stopped this in Benton County. It is up to you folks in Fayetteville to stand up and be counted and stop this here. Be an environmentalist by all means, but don't compromise your property rights in the process. Keep in mind the water in Beaver Lake is in better shape now than it ever has been. It has been steadily improving since 1987 when the Fayetteville Nolan Water Treatment Plant was put online, and it is still improving. And this is in spite of the tremendous increase in population and industry in Washington and Benton counties.
Mr. Cossack, I'm going to have to ask you to wrap on up here. You sat down. You sat down.
Expert, and your guys are sitting there smirking at him.
Sit down, Jim, or I'll have you removed.
I don't believe I'm overstating my time. I have about another 30 seconds.
Okay.
Last but not least, the Arkansas Farm Federation, the Farm Bureau with over 200,000 members, feels very strongly about eminent domain and private property rights. Some excerpts from their resolutions are, quote, "We oppose legislation infringing on the rights of private property owners." Another quote, If the use or value of private property is diminished in any respect by legislation or regulation, the property owner should be adequately compensated. And last, we support legislation to require any taking of land for riparian zones by counties or other agencies be forbidden before personally notifying in writing all property owners who can be identified based upon the county tax roll. Letters shall consist of the owner's land to be affected, the time, place, and date of public hearing in bold print, and a map outlining the riparian zones to be included. Do not approve this ordinance. Opt instead for an education-based program. 5 years ago, the Benton County Quorum Court refused to pass a similar ordinance, and no one can say Beaver Lake water quality in the interim has deteriorated as a result. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, who would be next? Stop. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. My name is Terry Lane. I'm a lifelong resident of Fayetteville. I live in Ward 3, one lot removed from a tributary of Mud Creek that is part of this ordinance. I'm a graduate of the University of Arkansas with a degree in environmental soil and water science. I'm an environmental educator. I'm active with the faith-based Caring for Creation movement in Northwest Arkansas. I'm a member of the Environmental Action Committee for the City of Fayetteville, the volunteer project leader for the Community Wildlife Habitat Project, and the mother of 2 little girls. From all of those perspectives, I appeal to you tonight to pass this Streamside Protection Ordinance. I understand that the arguments have been made previously for how sound the science is behind this ordinance. I appreciate you passing the leaving in the woody vegetation. That is important. I can tell you that riparian zone, from going to college in the mid-90s, this is not a new or radical idea. This is something that is important and, again, grounded in sound science. And, you know, it's our job as environmental educators to connect the dots for people so that we can paint a bigger picture and hopefully inspire better choices. I agree. Well, and also to point out that environmental issues, as was just stated, all environmental issues like streamside protection are actually economic issues, they're quality of life issues, they're health issues, they're a safety issue. And so they're important on many, many levels, as this ordinance is. You know, I would like to believe that as an environmental educator, we can just explain this to people and we can count on voluntary participation to protect our watershed. And I think a lot of people would. I know a lot of people who are and who would. But I also know people who wouldn't act right in the streamside areas, that wouldn't maybe put forth the same type of stewardship that we need. If voluntary adherence were realistic, we wouldn't need the ordinances that we have today. The last point I wanted to make is that as the project leader for the Community Wildlife Habitat Project. We've had great response in Fayetteville towards this project. We have a lot of schools certified as habitat. We have over 100 residences certifying their properties and more on the way. Great things are happening. This is something that people care about. I sent you a picture this morning, and it may seem trivial, but I want you to think about it, of a great blue heron foraging in one of the creeks here in Fayetteville. There's an immeasurable intrinsic reward to wildlife, and streamside corridors are extremely important to wildlife. I didn't come here expecting to talk about snakes, but it seems like that's an issue. I'm going to tell you very quickly, there are very few species of venomous snakes in Fayetteville. Snakes are beneficial. There are 4 actually, and of those, only 1 or 2 are you going to see around here. And that healthy stream sides also provide habitat for the predators of snakes. Thank you. Please pass this ordinance.
All right.
Hi, my name is Debbie Beckerdite. I live in East Fayetteville, and I'm a landowner there. I want to tell you about a task that about 10 of us undertook to get in touch with the landowners that were on the list, the 1,300. And this was a very laborious task, especially with the list that did not even have but the land address. It did not have any telephone numbers, so we had to back through there and find phone numbers to actually call the people. Of the 1,300, about 375 to 400 were contacted. Of these landowners, I can honestly say that less than 10% of those landowners even knew about this. I think that maybe 1 got a letter. This letter that I've heard that went out numerous times to the landowners, we heard maybe 1 got a letter, and that was all. So you're looking at landowners that may have heard about it by the media, by our calling, or by word of mouth. And that is pretty much where it stands with the landowners. We have got some of them here tonight that you will be hearing from. Of the landowners that we did contact and we discussed this with, they did not like the idea about the ordinance. There were many of them that could not make this meeting. We were trying to get them here so they could speak for themselves, and they are against it. So on behalf of them, I am telling you what I found with this report. They would prefer an educational process. We all want an educational process. Even if you had to do it for a trial period of time, 1 year, 2 years, whatever, try the educational process. I think you will find that the landowners will be bending over backwards to accommodate you for what you're trying to accomplish here. And they want to do what is right on their own property. We just don't want the government coming in and taking control of the property in any form. My own property, I do not want anybody coming in there telling me what to do with it. I take care of it myself. And as a property owner, I will be very upset. I have sent emails to you. Many of these people just vocally told me, my son is an attorney, I've got friends that are attorneys. I fully intend to pursue this. You're opening up a can of worms. And you really do need to consider the implementation of this and what it's going to cost the city, even to keep it inspected, and the extra work it's going to take for the city. Also, one of the things that was mentioned, you say in your presentation that you're going to increase the value of the property. This is not the way the landowners look at it. They look at it that it's going to devalue their property. Most of them spent good money to buy property that was on water. They will not be able to recoup that because now you're going to limit what can happen to it. And you're going to have a resale on some property where they're going to have government intrusion and telling them what they can do with it. And this is not right. And this is what you're going to hear about in lawsuits. And I can assure you it is going to happen. We do not want this ordinance. We absolutely do not. And I can tell you, I am very passionate about not having this ordinance. I took 4 hours of my work time off without pay just to come here and have for several of the meetings. We do not want this ordinance. Thank you.
Sir, did you have a question for Mr.?
I have a question.
Dave?
Well, have the city, since I've been a council member, I can speak to that, has been conducting, we have hired and we're required to conduct stormwater education, public stormwater education, and through the Agricultural Extension Office. And I'm wondering if you've ever participated in any of that.
I haven't come to, if you're talking about workshops or seminars or any of that, I have not been able to because of my work schedule.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Bruce Richard, and I'm a resident of Ward 2. I live on Willow Street. And I'm here tonight to show my support for the Streamside Protection Ordinance and advocate its passing. I believe that the best management practices contained within the ordinance will result in a higher quality of stormwater runoff and a reduced quantity of runoff. I also feel like it will be protective of riparian and aquatic habitat in the creeks, both inside the city and outside the city limits. And it will be another good example of Fayetteville's commitment to environmental stewardship. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Locke Isaacson. I am a resident of Ward 4. I'm here to show my support for the Streamside Protection Ordinance. I believe that Fayetteville has the potential to show leadership in sustainable practices, and I'm in favor of protecting our drinking water. And as a future homeowner, I would like to realize an increased property value.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Connie Crisp, and I am a property owner of 25 years. I live on Mount Sequoia. I'm very happy to be there. And also, since it was brought up, I do have acreage on Beaver Lake. And I would like to tell you how much I support what you're doing with this ordinance. And I appreciate all of your work. I also work in environmental education with young people. And I appreciate what you're doing now and also looking into the future of what's going to be going on for these young people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, my name is Joe Alexander and I live in Fayetteville. And I'm against the Streamside Protection Ordinance for these reasons. I'm an organic gardener and keeping the environment in good condition is very important to me, but I recognize it's very important to stay balanced in life, and good human relationships are just as important as the environment. So whatever we do in the name of environmental protection should not violate the principles of good human relationships. Otherwise, no good is done overall. I recognize that property owners have generally worked very hard for many years to pay for their property. Further, they bear the burden of paying taxes on it and working often at considerable expense to maintain it. Property ownership involves a lot of burdens and responsibilities, and in return, the property owner should be able to enjoy proper rights and privileges of ownership. They should be free to do whatever they want with their property as long as what they do isn't harming or damaging anyone else in a significant way, and not just maybe causing some minor irritation to somebody. That's the right point of balance in property ownership that should be maintained. I consider this ordinance immoral and wrong because it's based on the premise that the property owner should bear all the burdens and responsibilities, while the government should have all the rights and privileges to decide what can be done with that property. The fact that some things are grandfathered in and the owner is still left with some rights doesn't make it right. That's like saying it's okay that somebody robbed the convenience store because they only took $10. A crime isn't not a crime just because the damage could have been worse. I also don't see that this ordinance will really do anything significant to improve the environment. A law against pollution should identify a specific form of pollution that is a significant problem and be aimed at stopping the specific acts that are causing that pollution. Otherwise, it's vague and overreaching. I went to the League of Women Voters Forum on this issue and heard some vague talk about non-point source pollution, which I believe is a term for something that doesn't really exist. Pollution always comes from some point. If people are not releasing something harmful and unnatural into the environment from some point, then all you have is nature carrying on as nature naturally does. And I can't see that this ordinance is a serious effort at preventing pollution, because at the League of Women Voters Forum, we were told that spraying of herbicides and pesticides within the 50-foot zone would be allowed, but pets would not be allowed, as if dogs and cats are a more serious form of pollution than toxic chemicals specifically designed to kill plants and animals. I can't see that pet dogs and cats are any more of a pollution problem than deer and raccoons and coyotes and hawks. If there is significant pollution in Beaver Lake from animal manure, I'd expect it's coming from the Tyson chicken houses and not from dogs and cats. Also, another thing I didn't like that was said at the League of Women Voters Forum is that land in this 50-foot zone would be not allowed to be cultivated. And now we see the food prices going very high, and there's been a lot of bad weather, which is causing some crop losses, and there might be food shortages, and a lot of people are wanting to get back to growing more of their own food. And with the economy in this kind of condition, with the food situation this way, I don't think any land should be off limits to cultivation of food. So I urge you to reject this Streamside Protection Ordinance. It's too much of a violation of good human relationships without really doing any significant benefit to the environment.
Thank you, Jim.
Can we clarify? Will you clarify the cultivation? Can we?
Yes, you sure can.
Sorry, which point did you
The
want me to clarify?
cultivation, I believe, was.
That's right. That was never the intent to prohibit gardening, and in fact, at the last council meeting, that was clarified by an amendment that the council made, so it's very clear gardens are allowed in that buffer area.
Did you hear that, Joe?
I heard it.
Okay.
It still doesn't make it right because you're taking some.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Joe.
Hello, Mayor Jordan. I'm Dot Neely. I'm a resident of Ward 1, and I've lived in Fayetteville in general since the early 70s. I've seen a lot of changes. We're going to continue to see more changes as population increases. There'll be more and more pressures. Bringing this ordinance to the forefront at this time and allowing comment and debate is an educational process in and of itself. And I think that everyone that has been in the audience here has had the opportunity to learn more about the pros and cons of setting protections in place. So I would encourage the city to continue its educational outreach and have a more informed public regarding the protections as we go forward with looking at within the next 14 years the doubling of the population in the area. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Bill Mueller. I live in the morning shadow of the stadium on a 12% grade. There's an underground stream runs through my property and undermines the foundation of my house. If this ordinance had been passed, and if it would apply to underground streams 50 years ago, I wouldn't have that problem today. Now, the way I look at this ordinance, and I'm speaking in favor of the ordinance, the way I look at this ordinance is it's a preemptive strike against the kind of damage that can occur in the future if you don't take action now. The need for this ordinance has been proved. It's documented. The research has been thorough. This is a well-crafted ordinance. It has some consideration, some considerable consideration for the current property owner and for current uses. A lot of things are grandfathered. There is the grandfather protection. There is also the variance procedure, which is built in to take care of cases that are not explicitly stated in the ordinance. And by the way, I think it would be a mistake to try to state every case explicitly in an ordinance. An ordinance is a policy statement. You have the best management practices manual, which lays out a lot of detail. You have other documents which lay out the detail. I am very much in favor of this ordinance. I believe it is necessary because if you look out my front window up that 12% grade on the street across from my kitchen window, you'll see trash cans on the side of the street that have been there for the entire past week since the last trash collection. In one place, they've been there for the past 6 weeks because the residents do not take those cans in as required by ordinance. If you're going to rely on voluntary cooperation, you are in for disappointment. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Steve Warden. I live at 3784 Spyglass Hill Drive in the Stonebridge Phase 5 subdivision. My property backs up to Crescent Lake, if anybody's familiar with that golf course area out there. Every lot across from Phase 5 has been developed, and it is clear to the lake, as is my lot, and as is the lot next to me. I understand that can be grandfathered in, but there are 12 to 14 lots south of me that have not sold yet. And if they consider them lakefront property and they can't take any vegetation out to get to the lake, then that's no longer a lakefront property. That is a 25-foot weed bed property. And that's going to be half of most of those yards. I have the largest lot that was out there. My property line goes out into the lake several feet on a triangle. I have a grade, probably grade enough for the 50-foot. It doesn't hurt my property at all because I'm grandfathered in. I don't intend to put anything down there unless it would be like a fishing dock. If I put a fishing dock out there with this ordinance grandfathered in, now I've got to bring new vegetation back in there and come to the great management practices. I spent a lot of money landscaping my yard, and I'm proud of what it looks like. And it runs off into a lake that has a 12-inch spillway at the level of the lake that flows down into the White River. It also has a spillway over a little dam area that goes up to the 17th green that spills off into a 150-foot area before it gets to the White River. Every new project that comes before the city has to have stormwater retention submitted on it. And if you put retention ponds in these new projects, it will in effect take care of a lot of keeping the stuff out of the lake. It will hold it. That's what they're designed to do, or you wouldn't be putting them in. And it's been that way for the last 10 years. They've been really pushing it. Just speaking for myself, I don't want anybody taking my land and telling me I can't do anything with it. I'm going to try to make sure that nothing gets in that lake don't belong in it because I'm a plumber. And I know what goes in the water system around here. And one bad rain event in this town with our sewers and the condition they are hurts a lot more than this act could ever help.
Thank you.
I have a question for.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Sarah, did you have a question?
I guess I have two things, but I'll take turns if you want. I have one thing for Chris. Crescent Lake, not a lake. What is the Crescent Lake?
I'm not familiar with that lake.
It's Dash Golf Farm Lake. They named it Crescent Lake.
Is it on this map?
I got a call from the lady who said I was a part of the 1300.
Okay. I'm just trying to place it.
We're just trying to clarify.
Okay. Yeah, it's Dash Golf Farms Lake.
Okay, and then as I understand it, in the ordinance, docks are. Kit, you want to speak to it?
Yeah, even in the waterside zone, docks are allowed.
Mm-hmm.
The waterside zone being the closest 25 feet.
I understand that they're allowed. I can put them in there, but when I do that, I've got to come back and put bushes, and trees, and wild vegetation, and whatever meets the. Once I get in there and start working on it, that's the way I read it.
Well, I wouldn't think that would actually be the case, but I guess I'd defer to the city engineer. You would be needed to be built to minimize the impact upon the streamside areas and minimize any excavation.
I mean, I've got a waterfall and a fountain back in my backyard right now.
Brenda, did you have something?
Well, I'm looking at a map here of that. I think it's just the stream side that goes into that is affected.
Yeah.
In other words, you may be on the stream side area. I don't think everyone around that lake is affected unless they're on a stream. This is a stream side ordinance. I'm asking staff.
Right. The ordinance includes bodies of water like Lake Fayetteville, for example, or Lake Sequoia. We were trying to reference this exact property. If they received a letter, then, or they were on that list, that means that they are probably affected by the ordinance.
But everyone on that lake might not be if the lake is not within this area that you're saying?
I'm not positive. I would have to look at it more closely.
I guess just to clarify, the ordinance, you were asking about the dock. So if you put the dock in, again, it's a tool for staff to help that process, and so that it minimizes the impacts of something like that. So
I'm sure I could probably work around all that. But when you got 15 more lots that they absolutely cannot access the lake from where my lot is, I'm going to be looking at this growed up grass forever, or this growed up buckbrush, or if they can't do anything.
In fact, Mayor, that's I think why the variance procedure is in there, that if you have undue hardship that would be caused by the little interpretation of this, then you can go to the planning commission, and if you don't get enough relief there, you can come to the city council.
And I understand that you can bring it back as many times as you can ask for variance on several different things. I understand that, but it is a lot of time and energy that you have to expend, and if it is passed, there will be lawsuits because there's people that feel stronger about this than I do.
Okay, thank you. Who would be next?
Yes, Mr. Jordan. Matt Gokey spoke a little bit ago about the woody comments and didn't quite get heard. Hopefully you'll listen to me a little bit more now. I am a marine geology major from the University of North Carolina. I don't trade that anymore, but 20 years ago, I had a lot of heart for clean water, and certainly it's salt water there, but that also percolates into fresh water in the eastern part of the United States. I also am an Eagle Scout, so I am fine with snakes. But I have to say my wife is not, so I apologize for bringing that up earlier. But as a homeowner, on a part of this proposal, you're going to take 50 feet out of the back of my property. I found out about this, and I apologize. I feel very ignorant about this, but I found about it on Saturday when I got a phone call on my recording at home. I never got a letter, and if I did, I'd love someone to show it to me or to prove it came to my address. I have just learned about it, okay? And I've done as much as I can to figure out what's going on right now. I've taken the tape measure in the backyard and I've looked at it. I don't believe you guys have given your community enough time to understand what's going on here. I understand the education. I understand how important it is. And I'll be first to admit, gentlemen, ladies, I brush leaves down into the creek in the back of my yard. I should know better than that, right? And I will start bagging that. I can give you my word on that, okay? The point I'm trying to make here, guys, is the erosion going on in my backyard, and this is my question for you, doesn't come from the creek in which runs there. It comes from the storm wash that has been created in the Savannah subdivision by the city council who approved this whatever many years ago. And I'll ask you, if you didn't look at the front page of the Arkansas Gazette this morning, what was on there? It was a gentleman cleaning out the ditch, right? In the side of my yard is a culvert that's bigger than I am that takes all the rush water down from the streets through the Savannah subdivision underneath my driveway and dumps it right into the creek that we're referring to. Where those two things hit, gentlemen and ladies, it is an explosion. Absolute explosion. It's natural. There's buffers there. There's things there. I have a nice yard. I have a fence that goes up to it. My question for you is, if this law passes, do I have any right to go into that particular area and save that property from washing up to halfway into my pool? Do I have the ability to control that stormwater wash-off as it erodes away the banks? Not because of the creek, ladies and gentlemen. It's from the stormwater. I was out there at 12:30 the other night with a video camera, and I'd love to share it with you guys. I'd love for you to come watch my house when the storm comes through. It is unbelievable. Okay? So my point that I'm asking for you, as a resident on the creek who found out about this Saturday, do I have the right to protect my property as the erosion continues to go there, or do I lose it, and does my fence go down, and do I lose my property rights as this continues to erode away? Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Can I make a comment?
Yes. Sorry.
The city of Fayetteville recently received a grant to rewrite its drainage criteria manual and addressing those types of things so that those types of designs don't happen in the future. And this ordinance relates to that because part of the design, the rewriting of that manual will it will activate these riparian zones to act as part of the stormwater system, rather so that we're not having this hard velocity, fast moving water that does what the gentleman just described. And actually, that type of thing, it sounds like, I remember that he has a pool, and that vegetation has been removed from the banks of that yard, and therefore weakened the stability of the bank in those areas too. So keep that in mind, that this ordinance relates to the effort in rewriting this drainage criteria manual that the city is writing.
Staff, you want to add something to that?
Right, I think that's an example of what we're trying to prevent in new development, and part of that is addressed in this, in the best management practices manual. If you look at new construction, not only would the stormwater have to be dealt with in a detention pond or retention pond to reduce pollutants, but we also took measures in there to ensure that we slow down the velocity of the water as it flows through the proposed riparian area, so that you don't have that water shooting into the stream and causing erosion downstream.
Mm-hmm. So what happens to me as an existing homeowner? Do I get to go into that and repair that? I'm sorry, I'm asking.
That's okay. That's okay.
The ordinance doesn't change that either way.
Mm-hmm. What's that mean?
If I could get the property owner's address, we'll go out and take a look at that. It really is just a case-by-case situation.
I welcome everyone, all of you to come out, and I'd love to show my video. It's yes, sir. It's 3443 Natchez Trace, 72703. And it's not my pool, ma'am, that's creating the problem. Okay? The pool's been there for 10 years.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, my name is John Garst, and my wife and I live on Mount Sequoia, have since 1970. Number one, elected city officials will have power to dictate land use of taxpayers. Number two, it is a step in the wrong direction for freedom. Number three, we believe that this is an abuse of government not in keeping with our own democratic republic. We are bound to protect property rights of individuals. Coercion by government is not the American way. Please vote no on that.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, my name is Kevin Babin. I live on 1207 East Elm Street, the Neocasa Creek. I have a couple questions about how this amendment is going to change the current code. Currently, right now, section 168.12 says that you can fine someone for not following the code. This amendment that you're adding used to have that fining in there, then it was taken out. As presented today, if someone does not follow the ordinance and, say, for example, cuts down a tree or moves a shed or whatever without getting a variance, will they be fined the $250 for that, and also continually fined for not complying?
We talked about the procedure some today. Staff, you want
Let me speak to that, Mayor. There is a provision in both the Code of Fayetteville and the Unified Development Code that says that if a ordinance is violated and there's not a specific penalty in that section that says what the penalty should be, that there is the general penalty that can be up to a $500 fine, and if the violation is something that would be naturally reoccurring every day, it can be up to $250 a day. Now that is something that could only be decided by a court. You could be prosecuted for that violation, or anyone who would violate the Code of Fayetteville can be prosecuted for that violation, and then it would be up to the court to decide, number one, whether or not you did violate anything, and number two, what would be the appropriate punishment, if any, that you should receive.
Mr. Mayor, the first meeting that I wasn't invited to, that I went on the website and found out about, I brought up that exact issue about penalties to your staff, and they were very open about that. In the next meeting, that section was removed from the actual ordinance being proposed. I find that very confusing that it was there first and now it's gone. Made it look like you were taking away the chance to fine citizens. So I think that was very confusing and possibly misrepresenting a couple issues. So I would like you to review that issue and whether or not the public was truly informed or whether or not they could be fined by not following this code.
Hang on just a minute. Has anybody got anything on that?
I think what Mr. Babin is referring to is it was redundant. We had what Kit just articulated repeated in this ordinance, and it was at the city attorney's suggestion so that the code wouldn't be redundant. So it's in this separate chapter, and it just didn't need to be stated twice.
It was never explained that it was redundant, sir.
And most ordinances that are passed do not have a penalty provision with them if they're part of the code, because they automatically will have the penalty provision. It's the only time you have exceptions to that is when you have a smaller fine, like for parking, so that in the parking sections we have these much smaller fines because parking is not as much of a violation as other code sections. So the vast majority of ordinances you see that amend any kind of code section or have a new code section will not have a penalty provision. Now, some of the development ordinances will have additional penalties like a stop work order, and I think that might still be in here, and that is something that would be stopping new development if it was in violation of this ordinance.
Okay. I understand what he's saying, that it's a universal thing, but it was, in my opinion, misrepresented. My next question would be, currently I have a house that the entire back property is covered by both zones. The first 25 feet, my shed is in that zone, and it is my current plan to want to move that shed. So if I'm understanding correctly, I have to apply for a variance to do that. Is that correct, sir?
Staff?
That would be correct.
Okay. So if I have to apply for a variance to move a less than 100 square foot shed, why can the city put a 12-foot wide path in the same place and not have to ask for public comment or variance? That doesn't seem fair. Why is that?
Mayor, can I just clarify? Sorry. If it's less than 150 square feet, it can be beyond the 25 foot. So it's just not allowed within the first 25 feet of the buffer. And the second question as to trails, and this question came up at the Planning Commission, because if it's the same square footage, why can't you allow that impervious surface? And the reason, it's a velocity reason. We were just talking about velocity and how fast that water flows into the creek, and that matters. So when you have all that square footage in a smaller space, it'd be the difference between me taking the same amount of water and then in one container having a spray bottle where I disperse that water over more surface area versus having the same amount of water in a cup and simply throwing it at one person. So you can see the difference in velocity, and that's the difference between impervious surface, not just for the city trails, but for a property owner who might want to put in a driveway, a garden path. They could do that, but it's spread out rather than in a compact space, like a storage shed.
May I make a point, sir?
Yes.
Would a property owner have to ask for a variance to put that driveway in?
They would not. In the first 25 feet, if they follow, you're required to follow the best management practices for putting in that 12-foot wide impervious surface. Outside of the 25 feet, it's encouraged but not required.
Okay.
And within the first 25 feet, the city engineer would have to determine for both the city and the private owner that there is no practical or feasible alternative. So the city will do everything it can to also keep its trails farther away from the creek, because we're going to be required to follow this also. It is only when it's not practical or feasible that either the city or the landowner will be allowed then to have this impervious surface. And then, as Karen said, you still have to follow the best practices manual to try to minimize the impact on the stream bed.
Okay. The last couple times I've spoke, I've asked a question about dishwashing detergent, reducing the amount of phosphorus or phosphates that was in that, actually restricting phosphates from it. I asked whether or not it was going to be studied and whether or not it's going to be evaluated, whether this would even need this ordinance to reduce total phosphorus load on our stream banks. Has anyone followed up on that and researched that?
Staff?
The city currently doesn't have plans to study that particular initiative, which I believe is multiple state requirement, and then even farther back was a federal legislative issue. It may have been studied by another body, but the city doesn't have plans to study that.
Okay, Sarah,
I would like to, can David speak? I know that David sent out something about detergent.
The state of Arkansas passed a law.
You need to identify yourself.
Correct, thank you, sir. David Juergens, Utilities Director. The state of Arkansas passed a law in January 1, 1994, that restricted phosphorus detergent or phosphorus in detergents. Also, all of the manufacturers that had made mixed detergents, some of which had phosphorus for some areas and some of which did not, have since the most recent code change in those 15 or 16 states have ceased making detergents with phosphorus. So there won't be phosphorus available in either dishwashing or laundry detergent anymore because they have removed that from their mix.
When was that removed? Was that just recently?
The original law in the state of Arkansas was passed in 1994. The most recent change that was nationwide for the manufacturers was in July of this past year of 2010.
Okay. So I don't understand why we're not studying that, because it seems like the original reason why we started this whole process was an agreement to lower the total phosphorus load we're putting into the White River from the Nolan side of our treatment. So if that's the real reason why we're trying to start this ordinance, why are we looking at 1,300 property owners? Why are we not looking at the entire city? If it's a cost issue, then why am I paying that cost possibly? I know you say it's not a take, and I understand that, Mr. Williams, but my question is there's a perception of property value loss and usage, and we had one gentleman say that if a landowner stopped use in whatever way and it was overgrown, they would lose that ability to reclaim that property. So that is a possible loss. I know there's a lot of scenarios that make it have to happen, but this ordinance seems to be getting off on the wrong foot and not letting ordinances and laws that are already out there do what they're supposed to do. So I'm asking us to slow down once more time, use the education that's out there. I believe John Pennington is doing a ordinance or a training this March 5th. People are signing up and going to that. I will be there. I'm trying to learn what I need to know to best manage my property. Let me do it. Don't tell me how to do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mayor, I have a question for you.
Okay, hang on.
Hey, sir,
Yes, sir.
when you were talking about a while ago and you asked about could you build a driveway,
Yes, sir.
you understood it as long as it wasn't any wider than 12 feet.
Sure, so I could pave my half of my backyard with cement if I wanted to.
Yeah, but if it's going to be wider than 12 feet, okay, I see. I'll get back to what you're saying.
So I can do that.
Yeah.
But does it have to be a driveway, I guess?
If it's more than 12, the ordinance allows for 12 feet, as I understand
Right,
it.
so I can put 1,200 square foot of cement in my backyard. So this ordinance allows 1,200 square feet of cement in the area.
Staff.
By 1,200, you mean you have 1,000 feet of frontage on the stream?
No, I have 100.
Right. So 120?
No, that'd be 1,200.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, sorry. 12. Yeah,
so
you're
I
right.
can take up to almost half of my backyard with cement the way this ordinance is written. That doesn't seem quite right. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's no practical feasible alternative, whatever he's running.
Mr. Mayor and City Council, I'm Cindy Cope. I live in Ward 3. I'm also an owner of property on Beaver Lake. I am chair of the Fayetteville and Bloom Committee. I serve on the Tree and Landscape Committee, serve on the Environmental Action Committee. As part of that committee, I have been working with the school habitats, and I've done a lot of research and gathered a lot of information to give to the schools about the environment. I came across a poster published in 2006, and I will leave it here for people to view, published by the USDA, by the National Conservative Resource Center. Bottom line, it takes 500 years to make 1 inch of soil. So if we don't protect our stream sides, our properties, and the soil washes away, it's going to be way more expensive to repair them than to keep them. And I strongly, strongly endorse this ordinance. If you would indulge me for just one more second. As Fayetteville and Bloom, we have planted over 200,000 bulbs, and no, this did not come from the Riparian zone. my own garden. And to help increase tourism, we've also published places where we planted the 200,000. And if I may, leave them over on the table for your review. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Amy Lamb. I'm a Fayetteville resident for 13 years. I live in Ward 3 on Karen Avenue on Township Hill. I first of all just want to say to those who haven't been made aware of certain hearings that I commend the city because I feel the city is very transparent and learn a lot about the meetings, agenda items, and all that stuff just on Facebook. And the meetings are posted of the Environmental Action Committee. There's a weekly newsletter that also goes out that lets residents know about what meetings are coming up. So I would encourage those who do want information just to sign up for that. It's a very good resource. I am a member of the Fayetteville Environmental Action Committee. I joined that after I worked for a very large retailer to the north and learned about sustainability and how I learned a lot about different aspects of sustainability and how so many things are intertwined. And I know that the City Council has done a lot of research and has worked hard to try to strike a balance between the environmental responsibilities for the citizens and for the town, and also with landowner rights. In my opinion, I don't think this ordinance is too restrictive. I think we do have responsibilities as citizens to be good stewards of the land and our natural resources. I am proud to be a resident of Fayetteville because of its beauty and because of things like the streams and the trees and the green and everything. And I see Fayetteville as an innovator when it comes to bringing green business in, but also doing things such as the community wildlife habitat, the Streamside Protection Ordinance. And I, for one, am glad that the people before me have had the foresight to work to keep our city so beautiful. And I support this ordinance.
Thank you.
Mayor, Alderman, my name's Michael Lawley, resident of Fayetteville, 28 years, property owner, Ward 2. Seat belts are mandatory. Do we feel like our absolute freedoms have been infringed upon? No. Seatbelt laws are necessary. Is it a shame that we need statutes to remind us that seat belts save lives? Yes. Statutes and ordinances remind us of our obligations as citizens and neighbors. It is a shame, but it is human nature that we do in fact need the 10 Commandments, statutes, and ordinances to keep us on the same page literally, reminding us of our responsibilities not just to ourselves, but to our friends, family, neighbors, and to our community. To think that we could live in community without the rule book is naive. This Streamside Protection Ordinance is nothing to fear. This ordinance is reasonable and will come to pass as a no-brainer, right up there with wearing seat belts. Are there 1,300 property owners who could be affected by this policy change? Yes. The city reached out to them. 300 of them voiced concern but felt satisfied with the ordinance. 50 of those voiced serious concern. One of the 50 had plans that could be denied by this ordinance, and even then they could make application for a variance. We have faith that the city will work with them to ensure that they are not singled out via the language contained within the ordinance itself. We have faith that if your plans for your proposed swimming pool or your proposed garden on the banks of our streams are, quote, reasonable, then you will get to build what you want in your own backyard and without compromise to our property values downstream. I have faith in our mayor, our city council, our strategic planners, in the Fayetteville Forward Green Infrastructure Group, in the Fayetteville residents and volunteers who have asked for this ordinance and who have worked so hard for over a year to bring it to us. This Streamside Protection Ordinance is good for us. It is what we need to do to protect our quality of life, to protect our property, and to protect our water. It's not about the taking, but it is about taking care of our property, taking care of our neighbors, taking care of our most precious natural resources. We support the Streamside Protection Ordinance.
Yes, Bob.
Sir, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
You just referred to volunteers who are in favor of this. Can you elucidate on that a little bit? What
Well, I know
volunteers are you talking
that
about?
the Fayetteville Forward Green Infrastructure Group worked real closely with strategic planning, and we're at all the meetings and doing all the work and asking all the questions and educating, you know, their friends and their neighbors. So they've been involved every step of the way.
So that's who you're referring to?
Yes,
okay,
sir.
Thank you.
Okay.
My name is Michael Zemmer. I live in the north end of the city. I built my house about 10 years ago. I hand-picked the lots, so I was the first one to be able to build. Originally, my lot was set up for duplexes, which was crazy. The whole side of the hill was supposed to be duplexes. They ended up, all the houses were built as residents instead of duplexes. But I built my particular house, because it had a large lot, so that I could, if I wanted, build a swimming pool, whatever I wanted. My neighbor to my north or south put in a pool. My neighbor to the north has put in a basketball court. His neighbor put in a garage shop. But at this point, if this passes, I will lose the value of having a large lot that could hold a swimming pool. And one of the reasons I originally bought that house. I understand I can ask for a variance, but I'm worried about the variance. If somebody says, we put an ordinance to stop this, why should we give you a variance? Now my lot, the 50 feet stretches a long ways from, you know, from the stream. I also just wonder about, he said, you know, 300 people were for it, and there was only one against it, or one who was, I guess I'm the second person who may be affected by the ordinance. But I have a little problem with the government taking the land rights of the people, especially if the rest of Washington, Benton County are not affected, do not have to follow the same rules as the city of Fayetteville. I understand somewhere it's got to start, but I would ask that you vote against it, because as a landowner, I bought it with specific uses in mind, and at this point, I don't think I'll be able to do it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Mayor. My name is Randy Werner. I live at 161 South Hill Avenue, and I am here in support of this ordinance. And while I understand that where I currently live is not in direct impact of this ordinance, I do understand the impact that it has on both our community and the environment as a whole. And I do understand some of these impacts that some of the property owners do have. And my wife and I, when we purchased our home, we did purchase with the understanding it was a huge lot, and we were going to build an addition. And we soon found out that there were some ordinances and things that kept us from building exactly what we wanted to do. While maybe a slight struggle, we figured out what we could and what we were allowed to build, and we built something that was great. And I completely understand the ordinances. There are lots in our neighborhood that actually aren't, that are large enough and are outside of any sort of restrictions, and they have been able to build exactly what they wanted, and it's not been great. And so I understand that these ordinances provide opportunities for us to create a better community as a whole. So I am in support of the ordinance. Thank you.
Hi, excuse me. My name is Peter Nugier, and I live in Fayetteville, or just outside of Fayetteville. Thank you for your excuse me. Thank you for your consideration and courtesy to listen to us tonight. I was somewhat appalled earlier in the meeting, and I think my ancestors and my older relatives would be turning in their grave, because this is the land of the free, not the land of the regulated. And I believe that government is to exist to serve and protect its people, not to regulate and coerce. And when I saw people coming up and saying, can I have permission to cut a tree or cut a branch on my own property? I found that's not the country I grew up in. I grew up in a free country. There are abuses, sometimes to freedom, but there are abuses every time to government overreach and overstretch. I too called property owners, as several of the concerned citizens did, and found that an overwhelming number of the people that I talked to had no knowledge, had not remembered receiving any notification from the city. I don't know if you sent them out return receipts so that you had documentation of that. But, and overwhelmingly, the people I talked with said that they would be fine, and they had pride in their property and they'd take care of it. Over the weekend, my wife and I took a walk around Wilson Park. Beautiful park, beautiful area. The city's to be commended for it. Could not be built today under this ordinance. The walls had been built along the stream. The city had taken some measures to filter water as it came down into the river, little rolls of straw or something. I want to ask if the city was regulated or mandated to do that, or they found out that that would be a good thing and they just did it because it would be a good thing. And I think the answer is the latter. So I don't think Wilson Park would exist. One man said, if this law were enacted 50 years ago, it would be a better community to live in. Well, quite frankly, I don't know if Wilson Park or other parks like that would exist. The whole idea is we want to protect our water. We came here in a snowstorm and the city put out on the streets gravel and salt and things like that. Well, it had been 2 weeks since the snowstorm, and I have a picture of non-point source pollution, which is along the side of Wilson Park. It's the things that people line up at their car washes after a storm to wash off because it might hurt their cars. The city hasn't swept its streets yet to pick up this stuff, and most of it might go into the stream, which is right about 200 feet from this area. So I want us to be concerned about it and spend our money to do that. I'm interested in cooperation and not coercion, and I think this ordinance would coerce and limit the freedoms of the property owners along the Streamside. I'm glad that we have a budget surplus. I would hate to see this ordinance challenged, if passed, challenged and take resources and money away from that surplus to defend it. I think a better use of our time and efforts would be to work cooperatively with property owners, not to pass a law and mandate things to them, but to work with them. And lastly, I think this ordinance could be a veiled attempt to take the rights away and freedoms away from the property owners rather than to protect the water. I thank you for listening, and I hope that everything that I said has been taken in the right vein. I respect you, and I respect your service to our community. Thank you very much.
Could I ask you a question?
Sure.
When we think about land of the free, which you started with tonight, where does your freedom, let's see, how do I ask this? Do you believe you should have the freedom to burn tires in your backyard if your neighbor is, do I get to breathe the air that your choice permits you to do, or should we have ordinances and laws in this land of the free that protect my air? Where would you draw the line?
You know, that's what elected representatives are elected to do, to draw the line. One thing, you paint a picture of burning tires and polluting the air, but tonight I saw a picture of people saying, can I trim my tree, or can I dig up my dead tree? Coming to a city planner with such a minor thing, and then I hear language like, we might allow you to do that. That to me is offensive.
Can I say something back to that, Mayor? I would like to say on the stump issue that it clearly says that if the stump in the area is a danger, to you or you're a danger, then it can be removed. So I think I'd just like to clarify that too on this.
Yes.
Your burning tires could be a danger too, but all people wouldn't say that. So thank you.
I'm not trying to be argumentative. I'm just trying to
Thank you.
to present some points.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
My name is Frank Sharp, and at your last marathon session, I said, the way I grew up, I never took water for granted, and spending most of my life running a food operation that required safe, economical water, that I supported the ordinance. And after I sat down, this fellow got up and said that most of the people that were for the ordinance were not property owners, or at least didn't have a stream to their property. And I just wanted to clear this up. I'm a property owner, the western part of the city. I have a stream that runs all the way through our property, and I even have a hiking trail through my property. So here's one property owner that does support the ordinance. Thank you.
Mr. Sharp,
Hang on.
Mr. Sharp, I just wanted to say, you know, I don't always agree with you, but I've seen, there are a few citizens in this city that I have seen that have done the good that you have, and that take the time to come up and to speak. And for what you have done, and I really enjoyed your story about the beginning, your childhood and the beginning of the smokehouse, for taking the time that you do, I appreciate it. And I think this Fayetteville's a better city for that.
Absolutely.
Thank you. When I sat there, we had an ordinance that closed the bars at 2 o'clock at night. And you talk about heat. I mean, we would have people call us at 2:01, so the bar is closed.
Hello, my name is Warren Phillips. I would like to first off state that the Supreme Court has pretty much had a very narrow focus on property rights and that type of thing, and that does include the national takings, that includes state takings, and that includes local. And I did talk to an attorney who does this type of thing, and I mentioned what the city attorney had said about the variance and all that, protecting the city of Fayetteville. He said, well, that's a big depends. He said, I don't know, I haven't read the ordinance, I haven't looked into it, but he said there's a lot of side issues to that. So you really can't depend on that. With everybody talking about litigation and what have you, it seems to me that you're fighting a heck of a battle for a little tiny, minuscule improvement. I've looked at these type of ordinances, and it's almost non-existent. Nobody can really see where it helps anything, where it does anything. It basically, the improvements are almost unnoticed. So this can go for many years. There's really been no research. The whole thing is really, I mean, you know, you really can't see where you're going to get anything out of this. Now, considering that it's an ordinance and considering that you're taking people's property, because you're taking their ability to use their property in the way they want to. So because of that, you are restricting them in what they did. Now, when they went and bought that property, they went to the property, they saw it, they picked it for whatever things. They also committed themselves to many years of paying for the property, usually through mortgages and what have you, and they've sacrificed a lot for this property. And it's rather difficult to see that you guys just come in here and say, well, you know, we want to fix this stream because it might do this. Well, like I say, you're looking at a very minuscule improvement, and it's a really no value. Now, what I would say is take a look at the situation. You could do the exact same thing by simply saying, hey, let's have some workshops, let's get together, let's do this voluntarily. You don't need to beat people over the head. Most people are willing to cooperate, and if they realize that if they can't do this, that you're going to come back with the ordinance, I'm sure they'll be more than cooperative. And, you know, give it a year, give it 2 years and see how it works out. You know, you've always got the ordinance to come back to. So a voluntary system would be very preferable to the citizens of Fayetteville. It would be very preferable to everyone. You're not incurring on their property rights. You're not devaluing their property. There are so many issues here that are just, it's just ridiculous. So why can't you all say, hey, let's do this on a voluntary basis. Let's see how it works, and then if it can't work, hey, we'll have to take stronger action. You know, this last gentleman was talking about people's rights. Government is put in place to protect our rights. That's what it was put in place for. This isn't protecting people's rights. This is messing with their property rights. So basically, that's rather a bit of a failure of the government if they can't help the people, the citizens, who they are elected to represent. And I thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to just bring up that.
Yes, Sarah.
In considering that, again, this was a citizen-driven effort, and looking at, on two groups, the Green Infrastructure as well as the Environmental Action Committee, and there are definitely, you brought up this idea of the government is there to, and these are elected people that try to make decisions for the citizens. And I can tell you that there are more citizens that I represent than just property owners. There, you have to take them into consideration, and I think this ordinance does, and we worked hard to do that. But also there are other people affected by water, the things that happen on properties that don't own property, and we represent them as well. And actually Fayetteville has over 51% of its population which rents. And I think they have a right to clean water resources, stable banks, and clean water, as I said, and beautiful streams.
Well,
So-
that would be very true, but what you're doing is asking 1,300 people to carry the load for everybody else in Fayetteville. Now, is that fair? Would it be fair for you to have to carry the load for everybody in the city? No. So what you really need to do is give everybody a chance to voluntarily cooperate. I think you'll find that'll be better for you, better for the citizens, and better for the country at large. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Can I ask a question before that lady starts?
Yes.
I have a question. How many people here tonight live or are property owners in the affected area? How many people that live there are opposed to this ordinance? Raise your hand. How many are in favor? Yes. Yes. Were you?
Property value still affects us all.
Okay. Are you in favor or opposed?
Opposed. No, but let's not get into.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor, for letting me ask. I just wanted to see what the numbers were.
That's fine.
My name is Vivian Hill.
Hang on. Yes, Adele.
I want some clarification. Did we send out letters to 1,300 or 300?
We sent out letters to 1,300 property owners. The property owners who had what looked like existing principal structures within the proposed area were invited to a special question and answer session. But all property owners were sent a letter saying that they might be affected by the ordinance. It was not certified mail, but I will say we got less than 10 back. We used addresses that were with the Washington County records, which are updated every month, I believe, pretty frequently.
And the ones who invited to the meeting, was that the 300?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I heard those numbers battered around, and I just wasn't sure. Thank you.
Everybody good? Okay.
My name's Vivian Hill. I live at 1950 North Austin Drive, about a block from Nyakoska Creek, but I'm not right on it. I think it's wonderful that everyone has been here and has been expressing their opinions. It's my first city council meeting, and it's the first time I've ever read an ordinance. So I believe that I agree with these people that are opposed, because they do, I understand their desire to have the right to do with their property as they please. But I'm glad that in some cases we can't do that. And as a property owner, I want to take care of my property, and I know that these people want to take care of their property. I know that they are probably the last people that need to be affected by the ordinance because they're already taking care of their property. I mean, you can tell by the passion that they have, that they're proud of the property that they own and they don't want to hurt it. My concern is that I don't want my next door neighbor to be able to put a trailer in their front yard. I don't want my next door neighbor to be able to put a car on blocks in his front yard. So I think ordinances are a good thing. And I think that the reason why we're having to even have this discussion is because there are so many people who won't do it. There are so many people who don't care. There are so many people who will not even try to understand the significance of the damage that's done. One constant reminder that we can all see is if you go north of Sam's on 112, that creek there has trees on the edge of it, but it continues to erode, and it's becoming a big scar on the landscape, and it's going to make the water that's in the creek more shallow and less able to flow and to go where it's supposed to go and to keep the water healthy. If you've ever lived in a place like Dallas where they rely on grass to hold the hillsides up, you'll notice a lot of slump, especially around the interstate highways. There are a lot of reasons, and it's not any of these people here. I just feel it, that we need this ordinance because other people won't take care of things and won't go to the voluntary meetings and won't read any of the resources and won't do anything to do it themselves. So therefore, we have to tell them to do it. And it's very unfortunate, and I don't like it, but I know good and well that none of you here would inhibit any of these people from improving their property with a deck or whatever, as long as it wasn't ridiculously bad in pertinence to this ordinance. I mean, it's a variance. It's almost as if it would just be another little formality, because we can look at it, we can say, oh yeah, he wants to put in a deck, that's not going to hurt anything. Yeah, it goes 2 feet over the 25 feet, but it's not going to damage anything. Here's your variance. So I really think that it's going to be a good thing if we adopt it. I'm very much for it. I'm also for freedom of rights with your property, but I'm also for this ordinance. I think it's great for Fayetteville. Thank you.
Hang on. Could I catch your name?
Vivian Hill.
Thank you.
And I promise to behave myself at the next city council meeting and
Ms. Hill,
and not clap and not yell, because I just got excited.
I was going to say thank you for coming to your first one, and please keep coming back. They're always not this exciting.
Oh, okay. It's a lot more exciting than it is on TV, though. Just like baseball.